oceans especially. And of course, she has a good working relationship with the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution in Massachusetts, her home state, as well as time on the water in the Navy. And she just said that really made a big difference in her life, and she encourages other people to really think about our oceans and our planet.
Yeah. Yeah, we see all these nods to obviously her love of the oceans and raising awareness about them. So it's really great to see, again, all of these other things that we can talk about because of this crew flight test and the fact that Sunny and Butcher are on it. So I'll look at the clock again, 2 hours, 16 minutes, 22 seconds and counting until liftoff of NASA's Boeing crew flight test. We've been looking at gorgeous aerials from our helicopter team here at Kennedy Space Center. We hope you're enjoying those.
When we fly airplanes in preparation for spaceflight, we call it spaceflight readiness training. We often say you can tell when the airplane's talking to you. In other words, it's kind of giving you feedback. You feel an extra rumble, or you feel that the gear going down a little bit slow or something, and that gives you a little bit of feedback to know that something's not going wrong or everything's going right. And today, Starliner and Atlas and Centaur are not talking back to us, and that's a very good sign.
And that's also a great sign. Again, we are ahead of schedule. Both Butch and Sunny in Starliner. Well ahead of schedule in terms of making sure they're strapped in and can speak and hear everybody that they need to be speaking and hearing to, and that their suits can hold the right pressure in case of an emergency.
We were talking a little bit earlier that we use paper checklists on this spacecraft.
There's a keyed headset on channel 1.
That way we don't have to count on the electronic tablet not working or something like that. We have, you can certainly count on paper. So we have an ascent and entry checklist, and then these small little cards that we put around the cabin in case we need them, including the avionics cue card that we talked about earlier that tells us how all the boxes are connected to each other. Now, we generally have them memorized because that's what we do, but it's nice that if something were a small malfunction on the way up, you can cross a little box off, and that way you know that that's not available, and you could look at the other lines of communication to different boxes to make sure that you can still do what you need to.
Sure, sure.
And like Sunny said, our fingerprints are all over that, so we've actually made that. The team has made those updates to the avionics cue card, so we had to put in a new one today.
Oh, okay, great, good to know. Now, this flight test is going to validate all aspects of Boeing's Starliner spacecraft, proving it is safe and ready to fly as part of NASA's Commercial Crew Program. So I want to introduce you now to Jessica Parsons, who is the program's mission manager for this launch.
I'm a mission manager in the Commercial Crew Program, which means I'm responsible for all the mission preparations to the different crew missions that go into ISS. NASA works jointly with the commercial providers to making sure we have a safe and reliable vehicle that's going to be able to launch to the International Space Station. We work hand in hand with them through the certification process of the vehicle to make sure that we address any issues. Launching humans to space is challenging. I don't think it will ever be a routine. I feel like every mission, we're going to learn something from them that is going to apply for the next mission. When I think about the dates that stand out to me from the Commercial Crew Program, is really those final days leading up to launch. The final countdown and preparation to launch, to me, is the most exciting moment in the program.
And CFT will be both Butch and Sunny's third trip to the International Space Station. Butch first went to the ISS in 2009 as a space shuttle pilot during STS-129 before the lab's assembly was complete. He then returned as a crew member of Expedition 41-42 in 2014-15 and served as commander of a fully assembled ISS. And then Sunny went to the ISS in 2007 as part of the 14-15 expedition and became the first person to run a marathon in space. You saw that there. That was the Boston Marathon. She went back in 2012 as part of the Expedition 32-33 and completed her third and fourth spacewalks. Both are going to return to an ISS that now uses iPads instead of paper, sports several new modules on both the American and Russian segments, and is capable of hosting a permanent crew of 7 people. And then after Starliner returns to Earth, future crews will see even more modules, including commercial segments and more advanced solar arrays.
Yeah, I think we're talking to Butch and Sunny. They said, yeah, they're going to be surprised how crowded or how full the space station is, and all of our friends are on board, including Tracy Dyson, who is a really good friend with Sunny. They were extra close during their ASCAN time, so it's going to be nice to see them working together.
Both together, yeah.
Yes. Along with the rest of the crew, and Matt Dominic and Mike Barrett and Jeanette Epps. It's going to be a nice crew, and I know they're going to enjoy their time there.
And it's nice always to have a couple more veterans on the ISS. You know, a lot of the crew of Crew 8 that just went up there, a lot of newbies. So it's nice to always have that experience on hand.
Yeah, even though they're not designated as full-up ISS crew members, I remember being up there on the space shuttle as a space shuttle crew member, but they counted on us to do some ISS work, and they even let us stay up for an extra day to fix the carbon dioxide removal assembly. So Butch and Sunny will be there, and they're ready, and they've had station training. They even have some parts of their space walking suits available.
Yeah, as a reminder, Butch and Sunny are not going to be part of the expedition that's already on the International Space Station. They're there for about 8 days, and really their mission is to test out Starliner and how it integrates with the ISS. So if needed, they may be called upon to do stuff with the expedition crew that's up on the space station now, but they have their own very specific mission while they're up there for 8 days. 2 hours and 10 minutes, 15 seconds until liftoff. Both Butch and Sunny now inside Starliner, ready to go. And we don't see any pad team members anymore.
Minus 2 hours and 10 minutes.
There they are.
ECS,
Yes.
Elsie.
ECS?
Adjust TISA flow rate to 170 pounds per minute.
Roger.
Yes, we don't see any pad team members inside because they are outside. And that is because they have gone through Starliner to make sure, again, that everything that is not supposed to be there is out, because they will soon close that side hatch you see right behind them.
Yeah, there's a running joke with the Boeing team and Sunny that they think that I might have stowed away on board, but I assure you, I am not on board the Starliner today. But when they do fly, my heart goes with them, of course, along with the hearts of I think just about everyone else on planet Earth.
Well said, Mike. Well said. And now I know why you were assigned to the broadcast, to make sure you didn't stow away.
Yes.
Keep an eye on you. See, look, we're keeping an eye on you. The camera is trained on you to make sure you're here at the host desk.
If I do step out in the next 10 minutes, pay no attention to the cameras.
Now, going up with Butch and Sunny tonight is artwork from children all over the world. In collaboration with the Space Foundation, Boeing asked for drawings and paintings in response to the question, which historical space pioneer inspires you? They received about 3,500 entries from 66 different countries and 35 U.S. states. Every single entry will be flown as a digital file. The artists, ages 3 to 18, received a certificate showing their masterpiece would be flown to the International Space Station.
Those are really cool pieces of art. And it's so neat to see that children from all over the world took part in it, are excited about, what we here at NASA and our partners are doing to explore the unknown. That's a great one. Look at that. Very detailed, beautifully drawn. This one again from Singapore. We just saw one from Mexico, Slovakia.
So not only are the hearts going up, but our beautiful, the beautiful artwork from our children are flying to space.
This one from New Mexico. Really great. And I know that outreach in particular to Sunny, both Sunny and Butch, but I know that Sunny really enjoys, we've talked about this before, really outreach, specifically with children. She has an elementary school in Massachusetts named after her, and I know she does a lot with them.
Yes, I think on her NASA bio at one time she was called a favorite aunt
Oh,
because she is
that's
so
wonderful.
so appreciated, not just to her niece and nephew, but also to all the kids. In fact, I know my kids call her Sunny,
Oh,
auntie, right? So she's for sure a important part of a lot of kids' lives and a great inspiration.
2 hours, 6 minutes, and 51 seconds. So the pad team members, again, readying to close that side hatch. Mike, that side hatch, once closed, won't open until the crew returns to Earth after their mission, yeah?
Absolutely. So that's why we got to make sure that it has a great seal on it, so there's no leaks. And when it closes, it closes. And next time it should open, the ground team, including Brian Gartner, who was we talked about earlier, are going to be there, and they'll open it up, and they'll see Sunny's smiling face somewhere in the United States Southwest.
And what are they doing here, Mike? They seem to be cleaning off their shoes. I'm assuming making sure there's no FOD, things like that.
Yes, the White Room has to stay nice and clean. They're waiting for a go right now for a hatch closure, since it is an important step, and they're a few minutes ahead of timeline. The around the mission control rooms around the around the country, they're double checking that everybody's okay to close the hatch, and then proceed on with the rest of the launch.
And FOD is foreign object debris. So a fancy way of saying things, again, that are not supposed to be there need to stay off of anyone that's in the White Room. Obviously, Butch and Sunny, actually before Butch and Sunny both ingressed or got into Starliner, they were each checked by pad team members to make sure they didn't have any foreign object debris on them.
Yeah, Boeing's manufacturing here at the KSC has been really extra careful to keep Starliner extra clean in its development, and and putting it all together. We count all the tools that go in, we count all the tools that come out, and there's vacuum cleaners everywhere to get any little metal shavings or any little pieces of extra tape. And I've been very impressed how clean Starliner has been for. I mean, this is the second flight of Calypso, for example, and our capsule that's being right here manufactured and getting ready to go fly next year. They're a really clean spacecraft.
A testament to the teams, for sure. All right, 2 hours, 4 minutes, 35 seconds and counting until liftoff of NASA's Boeing crew flight test. 2 NASA astronauts flying in the Starliner spacecraft for the first time, headed to the International Space Station. On the way up, there's one particular person we've heard throughout the day, mostly communicating with the crew. So let's head over to Brandy Dean and Jim May to learn more about the Capcom role inside Mission Control in Houston.
Thanks, Megan. The Capcom role has been around as long as NASA has been sending people to space. It's shorthand for capsule communicator, but it's used even when there's not a capsule to communicate with. For instance, there's a Capcom today in the International Space Station Flight Control Room working with the space station crew. For the Starliner's case, though, the name is entirely accurate as Starliner is a capsule.
Letting you know, crew insertion is complete,
So
and we are starting hatch closure prep and standing by for weather brief.
Roger.
Historically, the Capcom role has been exclusively held by astronauts, with the thought being that an astronaut would know best what another astronaut in space needs to know in any given situation. But when International Space Station began operating 24/7, 365 days per year, NASA no longer had enough astronauts to constantly fill that Capcom position. So now it's often held by training instructors and flight controllers who have worked closely with the astronauts previously and have a good understanding of the information that they need. But for extremely dynamic situations like launch and landings, you'll often see an astronaut back in that seat.
And that's the case today. You've heard Canadian Space Agency astronaut Joshua Kutrick a few times already this morning, including with some voice checks that he did with the crew on behalf of Houston. He will be the voice you hear talking to the crew all the way through Starliner's ascent. He'll be speaking with Butch and Sunny as they make their way into orbit, and he is particularly suited for the job since he'll be on Starliner for its next flight, Starliner 1. He is assigned to the crew along with NASA astronaut Scott Tingle and, of course, our very own Mike Fink with us today. And a fourth crew member will be assigned later.
So we heard some comm checks with the crew after they got into the capsule. They're a little bit ahead of schedule, so Those comm checks have already happened, but we are expecting hatch closure to come soon, and then another set of audio checks over the air-to-ground loop a little later as they get closer to launch. So now let's head back to Florida with Megan D. and Mike.
All right, so Mike, I want to take a look at the clock again. We are well ahead of schedule. Hatch closure preps underway. We had till an hour and 37 minutes for those to have started. So great margin there. Really, the countdown's looking very smooth right now.
So far, so good, and I think it's because we have a lot of practice, and practice does make better. Not perfect, but better.
Yeah. And actually, while we're taking a look inside the white room and our pad team members there, why don't we talk a little bit about each one? So we see number 4 there. That's Nate Keek-Franson, and he is the pad team lead. Manages the fluids team, who performs a variety of tests from leak checks to acceptance testing of integrated vehicle subsystems. He thinks he has, quote, the coolest job in the whole company, and feels honored to make this contribution to our company. We see number 6 there on the left. That's Garrett Pinder, mechanical technician. He helped build the rig that opens and closes the hatch, and he will close the hatch today. Folks describe him as the guy who can troubleshoot just about anything, and he has been on Starliner since day 1 and said he would be the first to fly it if he could. He has that much faith and pride in the spacecraft. Again, Garrett Pinder, number 6. Left hand of your screen there. Number 8, we have Kaysen Chernault, quality engineer and inspector, assisting crew with external tools and gear, suiting up prior to entry. Grew up on the Space Coast watching every launch and says being on the pad team is an honor and feels like the culmination of a lifetime of admiring and working in human spaceflight.
And we saw Kaysen and Michael DiCarlo, and Michael's number was 7. Those are the 2 that went to meet Butch and Sunny down at the base of the pad.
RC, conduct weather briefing on Channel 8 Weather Conference Net.
Roger.
Yeah, Michael is the systems engineering technician, performs final cabin leak check that we'll see later on in the countdown. This is his 110th launch to work. He said as a child of the 70s, he'll tell Butch and Sunny it's time to rock and roll before a hatch close.
And Michael's also a great welder, and he helps put some of our pressure control systems or some of our tubing together. It's really tricky. So he's definitely world class at his job.
And then finally, we have number 5, Armando Loli. Mike, you were talking a little bit about him. You were hearing him do the comm checks within Starliner during ingress. Now, he's the senior project engineer covering Boeing's Florida Space Coast. Has been part of the build and development of Starliner since the beginning.
He also has helped Boeing build a very interesting virtual reality headset that we can use to train ahead of time with Starliner, not just for the astronauts, but for the technicians as well as managers, so everyone understands what Starliner looks like inside and where all the parts are without actually having to get inside the spacecraft and taking it apart.
Yeah, just a really accomplished crew. Take a look at their skill sets. Like, they're amazing to work with, I'm sure, because you've integrated and worked with a lot of these guys, right?
Yeah, what's really fun is that it is fun. I mean that everybody has a great attitude. Everybody looks out for each other and does what it takes to make it happen, and enjoy the process along the way. And it's really fun to be in the space program because we get, as astronauts, we get to be part of so many really excellent teams, and our pad team for sure is an excellent team.
And so we heard on the communication nets that teams are doing a weather brief right now. That weather brief has to be done prior to them deciding to close the hatch, right, Mike?
Yes, we need to make sure as part of our checks that everything is still good to go. Typically at this point, the weather briefs are pretty short, just saying nothing changed or a small thing changed here or something really big changed. Let's talk about it more.
Yeah, the weather's beautiful from here, our perspective here at the host desk. No wind to speak of, which is a little stifling, if I could be honest. It's a little hot, but again, those are not launch constraints at all. Just maybe Megan D and Mike constraints as the day goes on, but We'll be waiting on the official word from that weather brief here shortly. Again, the team in the white room, when they do get the go-ahead to close the hatch, kind of what are some of the things we'll be seeing, Mike? So obviously we said they cleared out Starliner, but here we're going to see them like removing some equipment and inspecting the seal, right?
Exactly. So you can see that there's this golden frame around the hatch, and that's to protect the hatch seals, right? Because we wanted the hatch to be able to stay closed and airtight. So they're going to take that hatch protection unit out of the way, and that takes a few moments, and then they're going to actually get I think ultraviolet lights and take very good look at the seals to make sure that they look good, and then they're going to close the hatch and then do a leak check. They'll put extra pressure inside the Starliner and see if any of it leaks out. It shouldn't, and then they'll depressurize the Starliner to have a regular normal atmospheric pressure of 14.7 pounds per square inch.
Yeah, and there they are removing that piece you were just talking about. Some of the ways that they'll inspect the seal, as you were talking about, yeah, they're going to use white light. They're going to clean with foam wipes to remove any debris, and then they use black light. Again, foam wipes to remove any debris. As I'm sure is not a surprise to anyone, again, another very detailed process to make sure that everything is done as is supposed to be done.
Well, speaking of a child of the 70s, a lot of us watched Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and Mr. Rogers would tell us to take our time to do it right. And that's what we're doing here.
You always perfectly have like the one-liners that sum up the situation. So again, guys, very lucky to have this guy here.
Yeah, Butch says the same thing about me. In fact, I think that's the only reason he kept me around is that I made him laugh now and then.
Aw. Now we've been asking for questions on social media, and you guys have been sending them in, so why don't we take some now? This one is Nikki Colby on X asking, can you describe the suits in depth to me as a blind person? Also, what does it look like inside the Starliner?
Well,
Minus 1 hour, 55 minutes.
Well, Nick,
ECS, Elsie.
ECS?
Adjust the ISA temperature to 145 degrees Fahrenheit.
Roger.
Well, Nikki, that's a great question. How do you describe a spacesuit? Well, it's made out of cloth and some puncture-resistant material. I think a lot of it's Nomex. And on the inside of this suit, and it's really it's all like almost one piece. There's a reason for that. Because it has to hold pressure, right? So it's kind of like a hoodie on top that the visor can float go over your head like a hood, and then you can zip it. And it's a one piece overall that has long sleeves and long legs. And of course, it doesn't matter what color it is. Boeing chose the Boeing blue color for it. It has a few pockets on it, and at the bottom, it actually where the legs come out is actually a rubber bladder that goes throughout the entire part of the spacesuit, and so our feet go inside there, and then our feet also they put boots on top of our feet, but we don't need the boots to remain pressurized. So all we need to do once we are inside of our suit is put on our gloves. There's a left glove and a right glove, obviously, and there's a small wrist ring that you have to kind of click the glove on and turn to the left or turn to the right to make sure it's locked. And then we put our hood on, right, our visor or helmet, and then we have to put our head back and zip it across. And then all of a sudden we're hermetically sealed inside of a spacesuit, and we can do our pressurized leak checks, and it can protect our lives. It's comfortable. It's very lightweight. I think Megan and Dee have the specs.
someone.
Go ahead.
Step 200 L2 balloon cycle task is complete.
Roger.
I think we have the specs on the suits, but it's a very lightweight suit, especially compared to the suits that we've worn before. And when I moved from the shuttle program to go fly on the Soyuz, I was very impressed with the Soyuz suit. And these suits built by David Clark are even lighter than the Soyuz suit because the Soyuz uses a helmet.
And then Nikki also asked about describing what it looks like in the Starliner. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh yes, Starliner. It's interesting. It is. I don't say full of cargo, but it's there's a lot of There's 2 seats near. If you look inside the hatch on the left-hand side, there's 2 seats. Butch sits the one on the farthest away, and then Sonny sits on the next one. There's 2 other seats that we're going to use for future flights. This time we have cargo on them. The cargo come in these soft bags. We learned from Space Shuttle program that you can put more stuff into flexible bags than to metal containers. So we have these flexible bags called cargo transfer bags, or CTBs. And Boeing cargo bags are all blue, and the NASA cargo bags are all white, so we can easily tell the difference. And on the outside of the bags are labels. So we have bags strapped around the cabin. Butch and Sonny right now are sitting on their backs with their legs a little bit above their heads in a 90-degree position, and this provides crew safety for launches and landings.
Those were both very detailed. That was a great answer to that question. And again, Nikki, thank you for asking that. We also have Lizzie Bursett on Instagram asking, what is the coolest part of the launch in your eyes, Mike?
Oh, so everybody asks about launch, right? Because that's how does it feel? And sometimes I think people are asking, how does it feel for launch, like all the G forces?
Sure.
We only get up to 3 Gs in these things. And,
only.
Yeah, well,
only, guys.
if you've flown high performance jets like Butch and Sonny and the rest of us, 6 or 7 or 9 Gs are
Sure.
a lot. So 3 is quite manageable, especially with these comfortable seats that are built for that. So that's not the feeling, but the feeling of having your dreams come true, going into space with the whole world cheering you on, and all the representing the hopes and dreams of all the people that worked really hard on this mission and putting the rocket together, putting together the spacecraft and the mission controllers and the management, the people that put in a lot of time to make this mission happen. It is in that you're all part of it right there. It's a very emotional event, and of course I'm an Air Force guy and I don't talk about emotions a lot, but launch is definitely an emotional event.
Yeah, that's a great distinction, because you're right. I think when people think feel, or ask about feel, it's answering physically how you feel, but really emotionally is quite overwhelming as well, or can be. Emmett Reese on X asks, what will the crew be doing during their stay on the ISS?
Well, Megan, you mentioned that we're looking at somewhere around an 8 to 10-day mission for Butch and Sonny, and most of the time on the ISS, they're going to be working for Starliner, doing some testing with Starliner and certification. Right, we're going to see what it's like to take out the cargo, put in down mass cargo, things that need to come down. We're looking at seeing how set up the inside of Starliner for in case there's emergency aboard the International Space Station. Now, for Butch and Sonny's mission, chances are really small. But for a long duration mission, we do have to set up things like an ammonia sensing kit and a few other things that are standard for all the other spacecraft that visit the space station. And we just want to see how it works with Starliner. They're going to pretend that Starliner is a safe haven, which is a 24-hour lifeboat that they can hang out on the space station in case there is emergency aboard space station. And that helps certify saying Starliner is ready for long duration missions. And so Butch and Sonny and along with the rest of the team are going to get this flight test data.
Yeah. And you detailed some of them, but there's a total of 87 flight test objectives and many more operational capability checkouts that Boeing is looking to complete through Starliner's crew flight test. Dee, I know that the team will be watching each one very carefully, collecting data, analyzing that, again, on the road to certifying
Slick on
Starliner.
channel 1. Go ahead. Ready for hatch closure and pre-launch leak checks.
Roger. Proceed with hatch closure.
Fantastic
Inward.
call out there.
That's right, Megan. You mentioned what the teams are looking forward to. This is the great thing about having such a veteran crew. They've been to space before. They know what it takes to complete missions there. And so they'll be able to tell us, what works, what doesn't. If there's anything we can improve, how can we make the capsule or systems more efficient so that, as we continue on to Starliner 1 with Mike or, future missions, that, we have the most efficient system that'll work for, everything we're trying to accomplish on the International Space Station.
It's really exciting to be here for this crew flight test. NASA retired its space shuttles in 2011. So for 9 years, astronauts could only get to the space station aboard Soyuz rockets until May 2020, when Bob Behnken, Doug Hurley, two NASA astronauts, they flew to the ISS in a SpaceX spacecraft, Crew Dragon. And right now, that capsule is the one that we see ferrying astronauts to and from the U.S. to the International Space Station. So this second dissimilar system, Starliner, it's really important, right, Mike, that we get this online and in use and part of the Commercial Crew program.
Absolutely. We made the decision as NASA to have two commercial crew providers when we let the contract in 2014. And since then, the commercial crew program has been working really hard to give those capabilities to the country. I talked with Doug Hurley just the other day, right after our launch broadcast on Saturday, and he wishes everybody the best, all the best for this launch. And he can definitely associate with what Butch and Sonny were feeling and how they were getting ready. And I worked very closely with Doug and Bob for their mission, and now with Butch and Sonny for this mission. And it's really neat to be able to put together new spacecraft, and we're getting better at it. And we're going to need all that experience and test mentality and building fast, like we've learned from SpaceX company, to be able to go to the moon in the time frames that we want. So this is all great experience for us, and we couldn't do it without without Boeing, for example, for today.
Pad, air to ground 1.
Starliner, go ahead.
Starliner, be advised, we've been given a go to proceed with final hatch closure.
We are ready.
Oh, they are ready for sure.
They are ready, I know. We're ready too.
Several weeks.
Copy that. We're smiling out here too. See you in a couple weeks.
That's great. See you in a couple of weeks.
Which will be then when we open that hatch again.
And so now for the latest out of that last weather briefing we heard about and NASA's oversight of launch operations, let's bring back NASA's Daryl Nail here at Kennedy. Daryl.
Yeah, you heard about the weather brief. You're talking about it. The weather brief was a great one, just reiterating that we are in a great position. Outdoors, temperatures are nice, around the 80s. We have some light winds, about 10 knots flowing in. We do have some coastal showers, but they're pretty far offshore. We have a satellite, we have radar rather, that can show us that, and you can see there on the right-hand side, you see those showers kind of popping up and growing just south of the Space Coast. But Launch Weather Officer Melody Lovin just reported to the launch team that she is forecasting that they will all stay far away offshore. In addition, there's some cumulus clouds that are popping up and around, but she says those should be a factor as well. They are going to keep an eye on them. So we are still, according to our weather officer, 90% go for liftoff at T0 at 10:52 and 15 seconds a.m. Eastern Time. There you see the light winds and the expected temperature, and that only concern the cumulus cloud rule, because you can't fly a rocket through a cumulus cloud. Otherwise, it could potentially create its own lightning strike. So that's why they have that rule in place. There's a beautiful shot right there. You can see some of the puffy clouds in this shot, but that looks a little more compressed because that's a distant view, which makes those clouds look like they're more clustered. This is kind of gives you a better shot here. Looks like we're launching into a clear blue sky, and we sure hope that that holds for the rest of the way, and certainly the forecast indicates as such. Want to take a moment now to bring in and introduce one of the members of NASA's Commercial Crew program who is working the launch today. We're joined by Brittany White, who is with CCP. She is a launch site integrator, and you sit right over there.
Yes,
right back there. Been doing your job. I've been watching you as you've been listening to some of the milestones even pass by here, and you're giving big thumbs up. So I know your team has been working really hard over these past few months, especially during the launch attempts. Your insight is into the ground side.
Correct.
Ground side was an issue, of course, during the second launch attempt.
Yes.
But equipment was replaced. Dylan Rice, our ULA commentator, talked about that. How are we doing right now?
Beautifully. We are looking great for an attempt today and a hopefully successful attempt at that one. It is a beautiful day out there, and the teams are working some minor issues, which are normal that we see, but nothing standing in our way right now.
So many systems, so many things going on with the rocket that there's little things that always pop up that the team has to work. But as you mentioned, nothing big. This is the third launch attempt, and so I'm wondering, as somebody who's working this with each and every attempt in the long hours that are involved, how do you stay hungry? How do you stay after it with each successive attempt?
Well, the mission is an incredible one. I mean, this alone, working with crew in general, being able to be even a small part of the team that brings crew to the ISS, that is amazing. And this mission in itself is incredible. The very first crewed flight of Boeing Starliner, the first crewed flight of ULA's Atlas V, and the first crewed flight from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in about 60 years.
61 years.
So, I mean, just so many firsts, so many incredible moments, incredible milestones, and the team looks out for each other, and we're reminded of how important this mission is every day.
Great words there, and certainly we're glad that the team is looking after each other, because you guys have put in some really long days and long hours throughout this entire campaign. You've been in your current position for 7 months, so you're pretty new to the job. What's been one of the neatest things that you've experienced since coming on CCP?
Well, so one of the pinch me moments, I'll say, was in February of this year. I was able to be on the tower that we're seeing here live today.
Up on the top of the tower.
Up on the top of the tower, and I was able to witness ULA testing that crew arm and white room that we're seeing right here, swinging. They perform functional tests, functional swings, to make sure that on launch day everything is going to go according to plan, and work out any kinks that they might see. So I was fortunate enough to be standing, almost as close as we are right now to when they were swinging that arm, and not only seeing a piece of hardware that size swinging so seamlessly, that in itself was amazing, of course, but also realizing that, hey, we're swinging this arm to make sure that it is going to operate properly today for Butch and Sunny to walk down the platform, to go into the white room, and to ingress Starliner. So that was very much a pinch me moment.
And there's a look at that crew access arm, which will be stowed at L-11 minutes. We'll be doing that same movement.
LC slick on channel 1.
Go ahead.
Hatch closure complete.
Roger.
There's another great milestone, as you can see there, the hatch being closed. But that crew access arm, you've spoken like a true engineer, right? You've seen something like that.
P2, LC.
Go ahead.
Start sensor engine chill down.
Roger.
Arm
But it
control,
is-
LC.
Arm control.
Power on crew access arm hydraulic heater as required.
Roger.
All right, Centaur engine chill, so another great step towards launch. Real quickly, you mentioned some advice that you'd like to give little girls or young women who are pursuing this career in engineering. It's a tough field, no question about it. But you had some advice that you want to give folks.
I was given advice from a very young age: never say no to an opportunity. And sometimes you're presented with an opportunity that, at first glance, it might not seem like it's going to be a lot. But in the long run, it really does make a difference, and you might be surprised. So my advice that I always give when I'm doing outreach or anything like that, when I'm just talking to somebody, is never say no when an opportunity is presented to you.
You got an opportunity in college to put together a project that ended up going out to Houston and was tested in the neutral buoyancy lab, where they do practice for the EVAs and spacewalks. I mean, that's pretty cool.
Yep. I was asked to, hey, help write this proposal, and we're trying to put together an idea for astronauts to be able to collect samples.
Houston, Erdogan 1. We're ready for pre-launch cabin leak
an
test.
asteroid,
You can prepare for cabin pressurization per your checklist and
to continue and get that proposal submitted. So that was incredible, first of all. But when you're asked to participate in something like that in college, a lot of times it doesn't result in anything. Never would have thought we were.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Cool stuff. Brittany White, launch site integrator with Commercial Crew Program. Really appreciate your time here. And we're really moving well through the milestones. In fact, way ahead of time, which is, I guess, a function of when you've done something for the third time. You get really quick at it, right?
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, Brittany. We'll send it back to Megan, Mike, and Dee.
Thank you, Brittany. Thank you, Daryl. And yeah, way ahead of schedule, actually, just under 30 minutes ahead of schedule. Hatch closure again, in our very detailed countdown, was slated for an hour and 10 minutes before launch. But again, we can do things as quickly as is available. And that's why we're ahead of time.
Roger.
A call out there regarding Atlas. Atlas's second stage Centaur.
Cap is removed.
Starliner, we got the vent valve cap removed. And so Starliner, ground team is going to perform cabin pressurization. The caution will enunciate for cabin P high and cabin PPO2 high. As a function of that high cabin pressure, you can acknowledge the alarms.
Still out of cover.
All right, so Capcom telling Butch and Sunny that teams will soon begin pressurizing the entire capsule for a leak check. So we did just see hatch closed a few minutes ago, and you might have seen them locking the hatch with something that kind of looks like a tire iron. And actually, a similar mechanism was used on Apollo and shuttle spacecraft. So, so now that the hatch is closed, again, pressurizing the entire capsule for a leak check, Mike.
Yes, so we practiced this a few years ago for the first time, and when we did it, it actually made some loud noises inside the cabin as the pressure was increasing and then decreasing. So that now we made a call to the crew saying, "Hey, you're going to hear some things, and we're ready to do it." We have a voice-activated intercom system. We call it a Vox, right? So we turn up our Vox dials so that loud noises don't get transmitted and amplified in our microphones. And in order to do this, Butch also had to take a cap off of a valve that was that's inside the spacecraft. We do have ways to depressurize the spacecraft from inside, so we usually keep them capped, so it keeps things extra safe. And Butch had to take the cap off for when we depressurize.
And pressurizing is going to take about 3 to 4 minutes. Again, you heard Capcom telling them to just be aware of maybe some audible noises. And then basically the team wants the capsule to stay at the correct pressure for about 10 minutes. So that's what we'll be looking out for in these next few minutes.
And we talked about how things were ahead of time, and that's good. In case the hatch check doesn't work, we have time to redo it again. There's still a little margin in the schedule.
Not only is Starliner flying Butch and Sunny today, it is also bringing up nearly 800 pounds of cargo to the space station. Let's check in again with Boeing's Lauren Brennicke and ULA's Dylan Rice.
Yeah, Dee, along with our most precious cargo, of course, Butch and Sunny, we are taking around 800 pounds of cargo up today, and we are taking something that was added just a few days ago, actually, but more than half of what's going up is Boeing cargo, like CFT patches, mission coins, silver Snoopy pens, American flags, and a hard drive, which we mentioned earlier. It has about 3,500 pieces of artwork from children across the world. We're also taking tools, emergency life support equipment, and then that late ad at NASA's request just a few days ago, our teams packed a new pump for the space station's urine processing assembly. That is a part of the water recovery system there on the ISS. It is about 150 pounds. It's a pump, and it is replacing 2 non-essential cargo bags inside Starliner. It is all methodically packed weeks in advance besides that one late cargo. And about 25 bags are for Boeing, 10 bags now for NASA. And those NASA bags are carrying things like food, clothes, exercise gear, medical supplies, and anything the crew wanted to bring with them. On the way back, Starliner will bring about 750 pounds of cargo, so just a little bit less, and that includes one empty NORS tank. That's a nitrogen oxygen recharge system, and that will be refilled for future missions. So, Dylan, we are focused on the crew, on the pad team, what's been going on with the hatch closure and the pressurization testing, but there's been a lot going on in the background as well on the rocket side.
Yeah, that's right, Lauren. So as we've wrapped up the crew ingress process, we're starting to hear a little bit more traffic now back from the launch vehicle team. A few moments ago, we heard about the Centaur engine chill down. So the Centaur engines are fueled by cryogenic propellants, which are very, very cold. So this process takes about an hour, and it brings those engine temperatures down so that we don't cold shock them when they're introduced to those cold propellants. So that process has been started. The vehicle itself remains in propellant topping mode as the blue team is continuing their work up on the tower. We heard about the beginning to warm up the hydraulic system for the crew access arm. One of the big differences in today's countdown as compared to our countdown for our traditional uncrewed missions, our payloads that don't talk back, as I say, is the length of the built-in hold. So we've spent the duration of this broadcast in our 4-hour built-in hold. Typically, our built-in holds are 15 or 30 minutes, depending on the length of the launch window. But for today, it's been lengthened to 4 hours to allow loading of the crew and closing out Starliner for flight. With today's instantaneous launch window for the International Space Station, launch vehicle and Starliner operations have to be precisely choreographed to occur on time. So far, things are looking great. The team's working no issues.
All right, Dylan, we are about 1 hour and 31 minutes away from launch. We'll send it back over to Megan at the host desk.
Let's talk a little bit more about that urine processor because, Mike, you actually helped install one.
Not just one, but the first one. When Chris Ferguson and his team came up on STS-126, I was commander of the space station, and Don Pettit and I got to install the urine processor. It's a really neat kind of, I know it has a funny name, a UPA, right? UPA, right? So, but the urine processor is in essence a pump, and it takes our waste products, our number one, our P, and helps take all the water out of it. Our water processing assembly aboard the International Space Station, we've gotten to be really good at it. We can get over 97% of our water recycled, and each time we send a liter of water aboard up to space station, it's like $5,000. So being able to recycle water is not just good for space station, but for when we go to Moon and Mars. So this urine processor, when it's not working, and a space station program manager said so at the most recent press conference, we've got to get it up there. Other than that, we have these large bags full of urine that need to be processed, and it'll start stacking up on us because we don't want to throw it away. We need to definitely process it. So having Starliner, an hour and a half to go. Having Starliner there to be able to take up the UPA really helps the space station program a lot, and this is that dual redundancy of having rockets go up to the space station on a regular basis.
And the recycling of the urine into water is really impressive. Like the rate is 90-something% that they can...
Over 97%.
Yes, it's impressive.
That's a great technology for Earth, Moon, and Mars.
Now, both Butch and Sunny are bringing some special items of their own with them for this very important flight test. For example, Butch is flying 2 gold rings he had made for his brother and father that resemble the U.S. Navy astronaut pilot wingpin. He's also flying shirts from Tennessee Tech and the University of Tennessee, his alma maters. Sunny is flying T-shirts from the U.S. Naval Academy and the Sunita L. Williams Elementary School in Massachusetts, plus a diver pin and dog tags that her mom had made for her 2 Labrador retrievers, Gunner and Rotor. Sunny also loves to wear fun socks and packed many multicolor socks she plans to wear in space. Other items will remain a surprise until the astronauts have a chance to reveal them publicly during the flight test.
I imagine, Mike, that having these like personal effects is so important. And yes, for long duration missions, but it's nice to also have, even though if they're only there for 8 days.
As you can see, Butch and Sunny brought up things to help inspire others.
Starliner Houston, the pad is proceeding with cabin pressurization now.
Copy.
And a thumbs up from the crew. Let the pressure increase. But it's really cool. I know that from the universities that I went to, every time I wore their shirt, just to kind of represent like any other alum should, it really inspired the undergrads and the grad students to say, hey, if that schmuck could be an astronaut, so could I. There's hope. There's hope for us all. And it's so those are kind of things that make a difference to us. And hopefully make difference to other people too. It's inspiring to see your school represented in space.
Yeah, so personal effects and also those opportunities that inspire, because that's really a big part of being an astronaut. You know, you've said that before, that a big part of your job is also to inspire that next generation.
Right, we stand on the shoulders of giants, of those who inspired us. I mean, I can't remember. I remember, I couldn't believe it when I met John Young for the first time. He walked on the moon and he flew the first space shuttle, and he interviewed me for the astronaut program, and he ended up coming to my wedding. I mean, so it's really, it's my wife's wedding too, and we really look up to other people, and I know there's a lot of folks today that are looking up to Butch and Sonny as pioneers of a new spacecraft.
That's right, Mike. Butch and Sonny have spent a lot of time working side by side with the men and women who developed Starliner. Many consider the crew like family now. Here's their perspective on Boeing's journey to crewed flight and how their relationship with Butch and Sonny influences every decision.
I think of perseverance when I think of Starliner just because we've come such a long way.
Being on this Starliner program, there's been some ups and downs, but I would say we worked through them and pushed through them, and our flight coming up for CFT is going to show it.
It's really exciting. You can feel the buzz around the office. Everybody's talking about it, that it's so soon.
It means a lot to be this close to reaching our ultimate goal of launching our NASA crew to the International Space Station. It will be an amazing accomplishment.
All the testing leading up to this mission has been very successful.
The goal is to work out all of the kinks and make sure, again, we can fly and operate safely.
We want the Starliner to be as highest quality a product as possible, and that goes from software development to manufacturing systems in the factory.
We think about it as a test flight, but we really work towards perfection.
When we find something that we can improve, we go ahead and we go do that work. The safety of our crew members is at the absolute forefront of my mind.
We're not strapping an astronaut, we're strapping our friends in.
You know, the crew is our precious cargo, and everybody understands that. It's great that they have a relationship. I think it really makes the work that we do become more personal.
To have such legends from the human spaceflight world kind of be our North Star as we're navigating our way to the crewed flight test, it's kind of hard to describe how really special it is.
They know us and recognize us, and they become part of our team. Working with Butch, he is very honest with his experience and his feedback, which I think is really important.
I find him, beyond being a very accomplished pilot, he's a man of faith and a brilliant engineer. He's very sharp-minded and has a pretty good sense of humor as well.
Working with Sonny Williams has been an honor, not just because she's an astronaut with human spaceflight experience, right? But because she is another fellow woman in STEM.
Sonny is everybody's astronaut. She is the most approachable person in the crew office by far. I've never seen her pass up an opportunity to speak with a young person, which helps our agency. It inspires the next generation of space explorers.
Having them so well integrated into various aspects of reviews and milestones has just helped us build that trust.
There are challenges in what we do. It's not easy, but when everybody rolls up their sleeves, puts their head down, that's the rewarding part to be part of it.
And until that door opens and that crew gets out safely, that's when we'll celebrate.
That's the true end of the mission, right? I talked to a lot of people before, and that's what I look forward to. I mean, certainly getting successful launch, successful dock, but we got to get home.
It's just going to be an immense sense of pride that we accomplished something that is so difficult, to send humans to the harsh harsh environment of space and back safely.
As soon as they get out of that vehicle, I think everyone's going to take that breath and go like, oh, they're here, they're safe.
To everyone that I've met on this program, it's not just a job. It's a dream that we are making come true.
But you were saying when you were watching that, you really began to tear up.
Yes, you can call me Mike today. And
oh, what did I? Oh my gosh, I'm so
Butch
sorry,
is on
Mike.
the start. No, I just wanted to say that montage was really meaningful, and it really shows how integrated the crew and is with our Boeing teammates, and how much that their spirits and their hard work are helping us soar to the stars today. And so that was a really nice montage.
And Dee, your team, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is great. We've been waiting for this moment, and here we are. So, let's check back in with NASA's Brandy Dean and Boeing's Jim May, who are monitoring things at Mission Control in Houston. Jim?
Thanks, Dee. Flight Director Mike Lammers and his team here in Houston are still working steadily through their pre-launch actions, and everything's been going pretty smoothly. Been clear across the board most of the day as we count down toward today's 10:52 a.m. Eastern, 14:52 UTC liftoff.
Once they have lifted off, they'll have a 25-hour ride to get to the International Space Station. And with this being the crewed flight test, they'll have a number of test or flight test objectives to work through, putting the Starliner systems through its paces to prove them out before operational flights begin. The first of those will come after Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams reach orbit today, when they'll be doing some manual piloting checkouts while they're still well away from the space station. They'll be flying some attitude maneuvers, changing Starliner's orientation using only visual cues to start with, and then using Starliner's attitude direction indicator, which will be used for all the other planned attitude maneuvers. They'll also point the spacecraft's tail to the sun to demonstrate that it can use solar arrays to recharge its batteries.
And once they arrive near station, they'll take over with manual control again to demonstrate their ability to station keep for 5 minutes at the opening of the approach corridor. And this corridor reaches out to a little under 250 meters away from the forward docking port on the ISS Harmony node, or as you may hear as we listen into the flight loops later, node 2 forward. Now, this maneuver should be pretty familiar to both Butch and Sunny. It's very similar to flight ops they performed while in the Navy, things like lining up an aircraft with a refueling tanker, doing a landing approach of the carrier, and for Sunny, hovering a helicopter over a landing pad. And this demonstration will be a checkout of manual 6 degree of freedom control. So that will use both joysticks and Starliner. The translational hand controller, pretty similar to like a throttle stick in an aircraft. And the rotational hand controller, which looks and operates almost identically to a joystick in an aircraft.
But we've got to get into orbit before we can do any of that. We've got another 1 hour and 20 minutes.
Side hatch is being configured. Audible noise may be heard.
As I was saying, another now 1 hour and 19 minutes until today's 10:52 a.m. Eastern launch. Flight Director Mike Lammers has been keeping close eye on the activities in Florida as the crew got into their seats and went through their suit checks. Also, as they closed the hatch and started pressurizing Starliner. In about an hour, Lammers is going to be polling the team here in Houston for goes or no-goes, hoping to get thumbs up across the board for today's launch. He'll be speaking for his team when he gives his final go-no-go to the launch conductor about 7 minutes before launch.
The International Space Station also has to be go to welcome Starliner tomorrow. So let's go back to the Space Station Flight Control Room and NASA's Rob Navius for an update. Rob?
Thanks, Jim. And the International Space Station Flight Control Team, led at this hour by Flight Director Allison Bollinger, has in fact polled her team, and the ISS is go for launch. During the week or so that Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams are aboard the International Space Station as visiting crew members, each dock day will see a different variety of activity for the Starliner duo. On Friday, the Starliner astronauts will continue unloading cargo they brought to the station and will transfer some of the used emergency equipment from station to Starliner for the trip back to Earth. They will stow their launch and entry suits aboard the vehicle and conduct a debrief with NASA and Boeing officials about the rendezvous and docking phase of the mission. Once Starliner's batteries are recharged through station power resources, Starliner will then be configured for quiescent or steady-state operations. So it's a busy timeline that lies ahead for both Wilmore and Williams and their Expedition 71 crewmates once Starliner docks to the complex tomorrow. And if you're just joining us at the time of launch, at 10:52 and 15 seconds a.m. Eastern Time this morning, the International Space Station will be flying 260 miles over south-central Turkey. For now, that's it from the Space Station Flight Control Room. Now back to you guys at the Cape.
Certifying a second spacecraft for regular flights to the International Space Station will greatly benefit the orbiting laboratory. For more on that, here's NASA's Antonia Jaramillo.
Thanks, Dee. We are here on the roof of the Atlas Spaceflight Operations Center, and joining me is NASA Deputy Administrator Pam Melroy. Deputy Administrator, as a former astronaut, you are no stranger to launch scrubs. Can you talk us a little bit about the process that our astronauts go through when a scrub is announced?
Yeah, good morning, Tony. It's great to be here. I was actually teasing Butch and Sunny a little bit this morning about it. Really, there are a lot of procedures that have to be followed, but for the astronauts, they'll have some critical action steps to safe the vehicle. So thinking about anything to do with the boosters, the propulsion system, maybe the pyrotechnics. And so they will take those critical actions to safe the vehicle. You want to make sure it's perfectly safe. And then it's a process of getting out of the vehicle and going back to crew quarters. If there's a longer delay, they might go back to Houston, but usually they'll stay in quarantine. And then it's back to hitting the simulators again.
And let's talk, you also have obviously firsthand experience on the effects of spaceflight on the human body. Can you discuss with us the human research experiments that Butch and Sunny will take part in during their mission?
Yeah, this human research program is critically important. There are so few people overall that have been to space that every single one counts. So when Butch and Sunny go up to the space station, they'll join our astronauts up there right now, Tracy, Mike, Matt, and Jeanette, and they will join in some of the same medical experiments so that we can have a larger pool of data. But in addition to that, we'll be watching very closely a couple of things. This is a new trajectory for a vehicle. It's going to be the first question I'm going to want to ask. How did it feel? What was the ride like? And then, of course, they've got plenty of experience getting out of the vehicle before launch, but it'll be a different thing after flying in space, and we're going to want to look at that closely.
Absolutely, we are. And, talking about some of the science then that's currently on the International Space Station, what are some of the new interesting experiments that you are most looking forward to learning about?
Boy, there is so much exciting that happens on the station, from studying basic research, but also doing Earth observations. But something that is really exciting to me is a new ESA experiment called Immune Assay. We know that the immune system of people in space is suppressed, but we don't really understand what's happening at the cellular level. And up to this point, we've only been able to study it in the lab. And so some new equipment that's going up is going to allow us to really understand at the cellular level what's happening in immunology on orbit.
That is truly fascinating. Deputy Administrator, thank you so much for joining us here today. Megan D. Mike, back over to you.
Now, today's launch will be the 100th launch of ULA's Atlas V rocket. It will also mark a sort of passing the torch within the company. Let's look at what this means to employees.
We approach every mission we launch with great care. This will be certainly the first payload in my career where the payload can talk back.
We're not used to having payloads with heartbeats. Having to interact and talk with them is pretty exciting.
It's human beings. I mean, how could you not be excited about human space flight?
Looking forward to getting to that final countdown and watching Starliner fly.
I'm pretty excited to be putting Atlas back in the business of human spaceflight.
We wouldn't be getting to that countdown if we weren't sure that everything was perfect and ready for launch.
Since I was little, I have always loved to watch the astronauts, and I just really think this is great that we're actually going to be putting them up there.
You're actually having a dialogue with the crew, giving the final commands, the readiness for launch. That's going to be a very unique moment. Obviously, putting the thoughts and consideration into the flight crew and those folks and the mission they're getting ready to start.
I've worked with my team very carefully to make sure that we've thought of everything that could possibly go wrong with that and accounted for it, and making sure that the tower is correct and ready to support The mission, when it comes time to retract the arm for launch, we've done everything that we can.
Many years ago, someone handed me the keys and said, "Here, you drive." Those are the ones that put Glenn into space, and I'm looking forward to putting Sonny and Butch into space and give them a good ride.
During that time, a lot of passing of the torch happened, a lot of learning, such as what it means to be a certified responsible engineer, to own that hardware, to know everything about that hardware so that you can answer any question that may come up.
As we are passing this torch forward, I want to teach them all the valuable things that I've witnessed because I've been involved in many aspects of the launch here at ULA.
To think about the fact that all of these engineers that I work with are passing all of their knowledge on that I can one day launch astronauts to is really special.
Human spaceflight requires passing on knowledge.
Launch day is nearly here.
I'm looking forward to starting this historic countdown.
We put a lot of attention and detail and care in every part that we deliver.
I can't wait to send the crew on their journey.
It's exciting to pass the torch to the next generation.
Pushing out boundaries will help us grow.
Feeling up for mission success.
I've been working on the Starliner missions ever since we were awarded the contracts.
Astronauts' lives mean more than a deadline.
I can't wait to launch my friends.
For human launch, quality is everything.
Ready to launch astronauts to space.
It will be a great day to see CFT launch.
Go Atlas, go Centaur, go Starliner.
That was awesome to see the actual physical passing of the torch, but also to see the faces, right, of all those who have helped us to get to where we are today, which is 1 hour, 11 minutes, and 20 seconds until liftoff of NASA's Boeing crew flight test. So we've been asking you guys to send us some social questions using the hashtag AskNASA. So why don't we take some of those now again? We have Jel San on Instagram asking, I want to be an astronaut, but I'm currently a mechanical engineer. How do I proceed? That question for you, Mike.
I also wanted to be an astronaut for a long time. And when I was applying to be an astronaut, there was only one path to become an astronaut, and that was pretty much to become a NASA government astronaut. And I went through the NASA program of making sure I had some advanced technical degrees and some operational experience. I had my pilot's license, and I was ready to apply. But now we've opened up the world of spaceflight to even more people, and there's a lot of private astronaut missions happening with other companies. So what it means to be an astronaut is very different. The best I can tell you right now in a short period of time is to do your very best, to become very good at what you do. You just saw the montage with the folks from the United Launch Alliance, and every one of those folks is just really the best. They do their best every day, and that's the best way to become an astronaut.
And I think we can squeeze in another one. This is Susie McGowan on Facebook asking if for whatever reason either Butch or Sonny couldn't fly on Starliner today, would the mission be scrubbed or is there a backup team member just in case?
Hi, Susie. I resemble that remark.
Verify range ready for FTS open loop test. Verified.
So
FTS LC. This is FTS. Start final open loop FTS test. Roger.
They're doing a kind of a safe version of the flight termination system test to make sure they're ready for launch. So Susie, yes, I as a backup to Butch and Sonny, was able to, we could have turned the around us if they got sick, but not on the day of launch. Certainly not today. We have an instantaneous launch window. We don't have very much margin for someone else to get into their spacesuit and go. But if unfortunately somebody were to not do well and we need to switch out crew members, we have preserved that capability so that the mission can go on. It's not about an individual, but it's about the mission that's important to NASA.
All right. Remember, it's super easy to submit questions for this broadcast. Just go to NASA's YouTube, Facebook, X, or Twitch pages and add your question with hashtag AskNASA.
We want to introduce you to the man with the final go or no-go here today. He's a familiar face to those who have been following human spaceflight over the years. That's Leroy Kane, live inside of the ASOC. He's Boeing's Commercial Crew Deputy Program Manager, and he serves as Starliner's Mission Director today. Previously, Leroy served as NASA's Space Shuttle Flight Director and then as Space Shuttle Deputy Program Manager. He's been involved with more than 100 shuttle missions. Our team asked him how today's flight compares and how his experience supporting so many astronauts from the ground influences every decision he makes.
Starliner Houston, we got a good leak.
The first crewed flight of Starliner ranks pretty high, I would say, in terms of not only importance, but I think significance relative to my career anyway. I worked with a lot of astronauts, a lot of flight crews, and of course also with Butch and Sonny. They bring a lot to the table in terms of helping us as a team get to a place where we're ready to go fly. They've been very integral to the process for years, and all of that culminates with this flight test. This business that we're in, human spaceflight, it is, I've said before, it's not for the faint of heart. It has the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. It's very unforgiving. Space is very unforgiving. The margins are small. We understand. And really to be in it, your heart has to be, you have to be, I say, in it to win it. So what I try to do is try to think about, what are we missing? What are we not thinking about? What have we not discussed? What have we maybe failed to have enough imagination or curiosity to pursue? And I try to look at things through a lens of what's missing. I expect it to be a very successful flight test. I think we'll learn some things, because we always do. We'll learn every time we fly. And that's part of the beauty of this business. It's part of why we're so drawn to it. It's part of what exploration is about.
If you're just joining us, welcome to the official broadcast of NASA's Boeing Crew Flight Test. We have a beautiful aerial view of the rocket and spacecraft on Launch Pad 41 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. I'm NASA's Megan Cruz. This is NASA astronaut Mike Fink, and that's Boeing's Dee Russell.
Good morning.
Now, we are here to watch NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams make history as the first people to fly aboard Boeing Starliner capsule. And Mike, liftoff of the United Launch Alliance Atlas V rocket is slated for 10:52 and 15 seconds a.m. Eastern Time. Where are we in the countdown? We're looking really great in this countdown.
Yes, so far so good. The rocket is in great shape, and the capsule on top, the spacecraft, Starliner Calypso, they closed the hatch about 10 or 15 minutes ago and are just finishing up on the leak checks, saying that the hatch is definitely holding air, and we're ready for the pad team to say goodbye and head off the launch tower. 1 hour and 5 minutes to go.
Now, CFT is the last test before NASA can certify Starliner for regular missions to the International Space Station for its commercial crew program. It's also only the 6th time that NASA astronauts will launch on a new spacecraft designed for crew. The last time an Atlas-class rocket launched humans to space was 61 years ago with the final flight of NASA's Mercury program.
Over the last 3 hours, both Butch and Sonny, who you see there on your screen, have been getting ready for liftoff. The astronauts were helped into their suits inside the historic crew quarters suit-up room. You see that there. And then they walked out to family and friends. A wave there from Butch and Sonny before the 20-minute ride to Launch Complex 41 in an Astrovan. After arriving at the pad, the crew ascended the crew access tower to get into the Starliner spacecraft. They ingressed or got into Starliner and are now strapped in, awaiting liftoff. Mike, why is it so important for NASA's commercial crew program to certify a second, again, dissimilar crew transportation system to the International Space Station?
Megan, it's really important because right now we only have two ways to get into humans into space. One is with the Soyuz and our Russian partners, and we all know that that's our relationship with the Russian Federation's a little bit tricky. We still maintain a good connection in space. And then we have Dragon, which is a fantastic spacecraft launching on the Falcon 9. But those are only two ways. Having a third way to get to the International Space Station, or from the U.S. perspective, just a redundant way to go, is that if something goes wrong with anybody, we still can get people up and down to the International Space Station. And we found that out with the Columbia disaster, how important it was to have another way to get to space. We stopped flying astronauts up and down the space station solely on the space shuttle, and we started flying on Soyuz, and that really taught us some good lessons then.
Mike, you spoke with Butch and Sunny recently. How are they feeling about the road to this moment with only an hour and 3 minutes to launch?
I think Butch and Sunny right now are probably taking small cat naps, or I guess Sunny, she doesn't like cats as much as dog puppy naps. I don't know, but they are very excited. They've had it's been a long road in quarantine, away from friends, and they've been able to see their family from a distance. But they are ready. They're very much mentally prepared and physically prepared for a great launch today.
As you can see, guys, Mike is a great resource for us today. He actually trained alongside Butch and Sunny to fly on this mission and is actually the backup pilot if needed. So we're encouraging you to send him any questions you might have about what you see today. Just go to social media and use the hashtag AskNASA, and we will continue to take as many questions as we can live. Again, a check of the clock, 1 hour, 2 minutes, 26 seconds and counting until NASA's Boeing crew flight test. What's significant, again, is that we are ahead of schedule. Again, we were going through the paces as things were done so that we can build that margin.
Starliner, we copied. Cabin vent valve closed and cap. Good config. Talk to you again in a few minutes.
And again, those call-outs there have to do with the cabin leak check that is in progress right now.
Yeah, one of the last steps is Butch puts a cap on a valve that can open up the outside of, or open up Starliner to the outside. So we want to make sure that the valve is closed and capped, so it won't be a leak path if unintentionally.
And there are more than 60 seals, right, in the crew module, 6 valves to check if they're in the closed position. And bottom line, this check is to make sure that everything is sealed so that the Starliner is properly pressurized on the ride up.
Yes, we don't need the atmosphere to leak out. If it does, we have spacesuits, but it's very good to double check everything, and we expect it to hatch leak check to proceed just fine, and it did.
And there was a particular PSI, right?
1 hour and 1 minute.
A particular PSI that the team wanted to see being held within the cabin.
Yes, so we start out at atmospheric pressure, and we use pounds per square inch as our measurement, so that's PSI. So we normally start at something, whatever it is here today in Florida, like 14.6 or 14.7 PSI. We add 2 extra PSI, so they were holding at 16.9 pounds per square inch, and that held throughout the 10 minutes, and that's an overpressure, so it would have leaked out if we had a leak path, and it turns out we didn't, so leak check good.
All right. And we have teams in both Florida and Houston watching every aspect of this mission. Let's head over to ULA's Dylan Rice and Boeing's Lauren Brennicke, who are monitoring the spacecraft and rocket from United Launch Alliance's Advanced Spaceflight Operations Center, or ASOC.
Go ahead.
Yeah, for anyone just joining us, as Megan just said, we are here at the ASOC. It is ULA's rocket headquarters over here on the Cape side. Dylan and I are in a great location to be monitoring all of the operations that are going on around us. We have the whole launch control team down here behind us, and you might be able to see us there in the middle in the glass.
Alarm at a bad time, we're going to recommend that line item 390 be disabled.
Roger, copy line item 390. LC concurs. LD?
LD concurs.
Roger. RLM? LC?
RLM 11.
Roger, please disable line item 390.
Active.
All right, another part of our job is to wear headsets and listen to the loops that you're hearing there on the broadcast, as well as some of the other side channels, just to keep track of everything going on today. We did just get an update that the helium leak on Starliner remains good. We have confirmation it is still acceptable for flight, looking about like it did on Saturday. So that's great news. And Dylan, Atlas has been really all over the solar system, but preps for today's launch are just a little bit different.
Go ahead.
Line item 390 has been disabled.
Roger.
Well, that's right, Lauren. So we're using our standard processes and procedures that we use for every Atlas Centaur mission, but today's mission is different because we have Starliner atop Atlas and Centaur, and 2 astronauts inside Starliner. So there are some added steps.
LC, this is FTS. Go ahead. Yes, Operation 55, Step 270, FTS open loop test is complete. Roger.
So we do have added steps to support those additional activities to ingress the crew and then close out the Starliner and then prepare the crew access tower for launch. But right now, today, we're remaining in our final built-in hold as we continue to prepare for liftoff. There are a few activities left for us today. The blue team will be clearing the area soon, at which point the final preparations for launch will get underway, and we'll be configuring the vehicle's propulsion and hydraulic systems for flight. The avionics team will be loading upper-level wind data into our flight computer that allows us steering through the atmosphere. And you'll also start to hear final comm checks between the LCC, Mission Control in Houston, the BMCC at Kennedy Space Center, and the Starliner crew. Once all that is done, we'll be retracting that big crew access arm. That'll be one of the big visual cues on the launch pad that lets us know that we're getting closer to launch. And then you'll start to hear us get into our final polling for launch.
All right, Megan, we are now just under an hour to launch, so we will see you guys back here in just a little bit. Actually, we're going to go over to NASA's Daryl Nell at Hangar AE. Daryl.
All right, thank you very much. And looking here into Hangar AE, and you can see here the CCP team, Commercial Crew Program, is back here monitoring everything that's been going on. And so far, it's been a beautiful countdown. Let's talk a little bit about weather. You can see around the pad, there's been some cumulus clouds that have popped up in and around the area, and that's because some sea breeze has come ashore. And there you see it. Sea breeze, of course, activating with some of the warm air over the land. Launch Weather Officer Melody Lovin says, though, no problem and no issue. Oh, there's a big cumulus cloud right next to the pad. She believes that these are going to be able to pass over by the time we hit T0, so not looking to have much of a problem there. And she just briefed us that we're still go. 90% go is currently where we're standing at. Again, beautiful weather outside. You see the one concern there, the cumulus cloud rule. And so they will be keeping their eyes on that. We did have some showers offshore. Those, though, dispersed, and that's not a problem. We do have some weather. We're also watching along the ascent corridor. We're keeping track of that.
LC, Slick on Channel 1. Go ahead, Slick. CST 100 pad operations are complete and ready to configure the white room for launch. Annulus purge was disconnected at 13:54 Zulu.
Roger. Blue team lead, LC.
Go ahead.
Perform toxic vapor and O2 checks when raising the environmental seal and configure white room for launch.
Roger.
Getting that room right there ready to launch. You'll see that environmental seal around the Starliner and get ready to go up as they get that room ready for launch and eventually at L-11 minutes retract the arm away. All right, again, the ascent corridor weather, though, it is low for any issues. So all across the board, we still look good for weather. There's a look at the satellite loop, and you can see all across the eastern seaboard, all the way up into the maritime provinces of Canada. Fortunately, we got a high-pressure system off North Carolina that's keeping everything pretty stable and clear out there. Just a couple of issues along the way, but nothing that would put the Starliner at risk of splashing down all along that track if they needed to, should something happen to the rocket. We're looking good so far from out here at Slick 41 and Hangar AE, and we'll send it back to the host desk.
Now let's take another look at the crew for this flight test. We see Commander Butch Wilmore. He was at the bottom left corner of your screen, NASA astronaut and retired U.S. Navy captain. Raised in Mount Juliet, Tennessee, married to Deanna Wilmore, and they have 2 daughters. As a naval pilot, Butch racked up more than 8,000 flight hours and 663 carrier landings, all in tactical jet aircraft. He completed 4 operational deployments supporting missions like Operation Desert Storm. Before his selection to NASA, Wilmore was on exchange to the Air Force as a flight test instructor at the Air Force Test Pilot School at Edwards Air Force Base in California. Butch is a veteran of 2 space flights as pilot on Space Shuttle Atlantis in 2009, and then 5 years later, he served as flight engineer for Expedition 41. So far, Wilmore has spent 178 days in space and performed 4 spacewalks, so this flight will be his 3rd mission to the ISS.
And Sunny Williams, CFT's pilot and a retired U.S. Navy captain. NASA selected her as an astronaut in 1998, just 2 years before Butch. This will also be Sunny's 3rd mission to space, making her the first woman on a test flight of an orbital spacecraft. Her first trip to the ISS launched in 2006. She served as flight engineer for expeditions 14, 15. She then returned to the orbiting lab in 2012 and was commander of Expedition 33. Sunny has more than 50 hours of spacewalk time, the 2nd most cumulative time by a female astronaut. So far, she has spent 322 days in space. Before NASA, Sunny was a former naval test pilot and instructor, logging more than 3,000 flight hours in more than 30 different aircraft. Williams grew up in Needham, Massachusetts, and is married to Michael Williams. She enjoys hanging out with their dogs, working out, hiking, and camping, as well as working on cars and houses. As the crew aboard Starliner prepares to launch to the space station, let's take a look at what's in store for Sunny and Butch while on this mission.
The mission of the Commercial Crew Program is to provide transportation for astronauts to the International Space Station.
Multiple providers provide you redundancy. Redundancy is important, as we know. In our systems, we have redundant systems.
But actually, more importantly, it's providing the aerospace workforce the opportunity to test out new ideas, new technologies, and work them into spacecraft. Butch and I are the first 2 to fly the Starliner, so this flight will be a crew flight test. So there'll only be 2 on board. We're going to fly it up to the space station, dock it, and test it all out, and then come back home.
Everything's new. The procedures are new. We have procedures now that we didn't have a year ago because we've learned as the process has gone forward.
We've had 2 test flights uncrewed previously, but this will be the first time we're putting people on it.
We're test pilots, and so we're going to be testing the spacecraft in all aspects of the flight, from launch, on orbit, all the way to entry and landing.
We're testing out the environmental control system. We're testing out the manual flying of the spacecraft. Then while we're docked to the space station, we have a bunch of tasks to make sure that the spacecraft can act as a lifeboat. And just in case anything bad goes on the International Space Station, the crew on board can come to the Starliner and make sure that they're okay.
This has a mode where we call it backup mode, which is your get home mode, if you will. We can, without any communication at all, we can still effect a return to Earth, do a deorbit burn, and hit the point where we're trying to land, even without our computers. You know, that old mantra, failure is not an option, because it's a very dynamic thing we do flying in space, and it's not very forgiving. And we know that, and that's why we have these multiple systems and multiple redundant capabilities, because human life is special, and we want to preserve it at all costs.
I think exploration is just in the human heart. Butch, he describes himself as the first thing he said as a kid was why, and I think that's in all of us. Maybe we don't verbalize it, but we all ask why, and that's what exploration is. It's that next step of why. So why not go back to the moon? Why not try to live on the moon? It seems like a natural stepping stone to the next thing, Mars, which just calls us. Like, why is that planet there? What is the future of that planet? What is the future of our planet? And to be able to take these next steps in exploration, we're going to start answering those questions.
We stand on the pinnacle. This is kind of where everything, integration, everything comes together, which is where Sunny and I sit. And this is just a part of the ongoing process of growing and expounding our knowledge and our understanding of all things for the benefit of mankind.
I am Sunny Williams, and I am ready to fly NASA's Boeing Crew Flight Test.
I'm Butch Wilmore, and I am ready to fly NASA's Boeing Crew Flight Test.
We are ready here at 49 minutes, 17 seconds until liftoff. Now, this historic flight test will be a major milestone for United Launch Alliance. NASA's Antonio Jaramillo joins us now with ULA's CEO and president, who has more about this company's road to this moment.
Thank you, Megan. Joining me is Tori Bruno, CEO and president of United Launch Alliance. Tori, it's so great to have you back on here. Can you give us a quick recap, first on the issue that occurred during the last launch attempt and how teams resolved it and got us to where we are today?
Absolutely. So we have a ground system at the pad that controls the things that occur in the last few moments before we go to ignition. This particular system is the one that releases the rocket from the pad and controls what happens to getting the umbilicals loose. And we have a triple redundant system that is also able to vote, and we lost one card within one of those three chassis that do this. Crew was never in any kind of danger or anything like that, but in our timeline, had that failed much later, we would have relied on the double redundancy in voting that remained, but that early on, our criteria says stop and understand what's happening. We did resolve it the next day on a Sunday. It is a card within a chassis that has power supplies. It was one of the two power supplies that are also redundant, and so the flaw was really that power supply going down and not switching to the backup supply built into the chassis. So we removed it, we replaced it, we put the modules right back in it. The chassis we're using we know works because it's the same chassis we used to launch Vulcan on Cert 1. Everything has checked out and been retested, and now we're good to go.
That's great to hear, and it is a beautiful day right now. It looks like it's going to be a beautiful launch. What's the trajectory like for this launch? I mean, who along the U.S. will be able to see it?
Yeah, this is a very unique trajectory because it's flat and long for crew safety. And so it'll head out from here, it'll go north and a little bit to the east, and so all along the southern coast of the United States, you have a pretty good chance of seeing it. And what that trajectory allows us to do is to have no blackout areas where the crew would be unable to abort the flight, God forbid, in the event of an anomaly. And it delivers them just short of being orbital, so if there were any issues with the capsule's propulsion system, they get a free return safely to the surface of the Earth. So very unique for us. We've never flown, apart from the test flights of this capsule, a trajectory that is suborbital before.
Wow, and talking about uniqueness, is there anything new or different on this Atlas V rocket for this crewed launch compared to other uncrewed Atlas V launches?
Yes, there are. There's a handful of things, and they are all safety related. So the most obvious thing is there's no payload fairing, because if there were to be an abort where we want the capsule to fly the crew safely away, the fairing would be in the way, so we fly without it. We also have an emergency detection system, which is like a very high-speed computer that is plugged into all the systems on Atlas and monitoring its health, so that if an anomaly started happening faster than any human could possibly do it, this computer would detect it and command the separation of the capsule. And of course, on Centaur, we have two RL-10s instead of one rocket engine for more thrust because of that long, flat trajectory. The last thing we do is actually kind of subtle and maybe a little bit trivial for most people, but we anodize the first stage of the booster to protect it from a thing called stress corrosion cracking. And just to be extra careful for the crew, we actually double the thickness of that anodization.
Wow, that is fascinating. Tori, thank you so much for joining us here today. Megan, D, Mike, back over to you.
And as we check out some pad team members there getting ready to leave the crew access tower, teams inside Mission Control at Johnson Space Center in Houston are also keeping a close eye on launch. Here's NASA's Brandy Dean and Boeing's Jim May.
Thanks so much, Megan. Welcome back to Mission Control Houston at NASA's Johnson Space Center. We are now 44 minutes away from launch and everything continuing to go pretty smoothly. Team here is under leadership again of Flight Director Mike Lammers today. Once Starliner gets off the pad, Jim and I will be with you through the ascent, giving you the play-by-play as Starliner makes its way into orbit and expanding on the calls that you'll hear from Capcom Joshua Kutrick, making to Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams.
There are a number of major milestones you'll want to keep an eye out for during Starliner's climb to orbit. The first you'll hear from Starliner's crew is roll program coming from Commander Wilmore, indicating that Starliner is rolling into the planned orientation for ascent and orbit ops. Then about 45 seconds into flight, the crew and Starliner will reach what's called max Q, which is the maximum dynamic pressure that they will experience during ascent, and that happens just before they reach Mach 1.
A minute and 35 seconds into flight, the solid rocket boosters that give Starliner its first major push into orbit will have been used up. Starliner will then hold on to them for just a little more than a minute after that, and then jettison the boosters before second stage takes over and gets Starliner the rest of the way to orbit.
Starliner will actually reach orbit about 11 minutes and 58 seconds into flight, at which point the Centaur's main engines will cut off. Starliner and its crew hold onto that stage for a couple of minutes and then separate from it at around 14 minute 58 seconds into flight. From there, Butch and Sunny will be free-flying Starliner on their own.
During Ascent, you'll hear Kutrick mentioning a number of abort-related milestones as Starliner moves past them. Starliner can safely abort all the way up to orbit, as you just heard in that interview we saw from Florida. That includes the East Coast, off the coast of Newfoundland, and off the coast of Ireland. Beyond that, it would just be able to safely abort to orbit, and of course, we're hoping not to need any of those options.
And the last major milestone before crew begins what we call orbit ops is the orbital insertion, or OI burn, which will move Starliner into slightly elliptical orbit as opposed to the more slightly suborbital trajectory that it starts off in after separating from the Centaur. From there, Starliner will be on its way to the International Space Station.
And speaking of the space station, let's check in with Rob Navius and the International Space Station Flight Control Team. Rob?
Go ahead. Thanks, Brandy. Back here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room, flight controllers are keeping tabs on the countdown and monitoring the work on board by the Expedition 71 crew in advance of Starliner's scheduled arrival tomorrow. After docking, NASA astronauts Matt Dominic, Mike Barrett, Jeanette Epps, and Tracy Dyson, along with Station Commander Oleg Kononenko of Roscosmos and fellow cosmonauts Nikolai Chub and Alexander Grabenkin, will be ready to roll out the red carpet as Wilmore and Williams float through the hatch into the Harmony module. Now, the dock timeline is designed to be variable. That means that the number of days Starliner could stay at the station could be adjusted depending on any further launch delays or undocking delays caused by weather conditions at the western U.S. landing sites for Starliner. One of the most important dock days for the Starliner crew will come 2 days prior to their scheduled undocking, when they load the last of the cargo items to be returned to Earth in the vehicle and conduct onboard manual piloting proficiency. That will enable them to stay sharp for their departure from the station and the deorbit and entry events that will follow. We're now 41 minutes, 9 seconds away from liftoff. Today, the operational loops are so far thankfully quiet. And with that, we'll go back to our folks at the Cape.
As we prepare in less than an hour to launch 2 astronauts to space, during this test flight, let's check back in with NASA's Antonia Jaramillo, who's with NASA's Associate Administrator, about the mission.
Thank you, Dee. Joining me is Jim Free, NASA's Associate Administrator. Jim, thank you so much for joining us. Can you discuss a little bit why it's important for the space agency that we have another American spacecraft launching to space from American soil?
Well, I mean, it is truly historic day that we have today. It is the 6th time we've launched a new vehicle to space, and this time with the first female on one of those missions in Sunny, and from the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, not the Air Force Station any longer. And we're also, now it gives us that chance to get back to ISS with another crew. And the learning that we're doing there about the human body, about technology, about science, of course, science is key to all we do. And then to prepare ourselves for those missions to the moon and then on to Mars.
Absolutely. A lot of firsts, a lot of important things for sure happening on this mission. You talked briefly on this. Can you discuss again why it's important just in general that we have multiple spacecraft available to send humans to space?
We need that access. So right now we have one provider giving us that access to space station. This will give us a second provider, which means if we have a problem with either, we have ways to get our crews to and from station, which helps keep the tempo that we've had for 23 years of having humans in low Earth orbit, but also that opportunity to get the crews back if there's an issue at all, and keep that presence going.
Absolutely. This has already been a very exciting year for the agency with many, many fascinating missions already taking place. Now with this historic launch about to take off, what else can the public look forward to?
It has been a great year, and certainly a lot of learning already for me about the incredible mission that we have at NASA. And the missions that we have remaining this year, I'll just highlight a couple of them. Europa Clipper, which will be an incredible mission for us to watch in its journey and understanding even more about the solar system. NISAR, which will help continue our learning of Earth. And then we have X-59, that first A in NASA, right, the aeronautics, which will go through its first flight this year. We're about to do an engine run-up on that aircraft. And of course, heading towards Artemis 2 next year. The crews in Washington this week planted a moon tree just yesterday with our deputy administrator, and that gets us on our path back to the moon.
Absolutely, and we cannot wait for all of those missions. Jim, thank you so much for joining us here today. Megan D. Mike, back over to you.
Thank you both. And we are now 38 minutes until liftoff of NASA's Boeing crew flight test with Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams. You can see there inside the Starliner spacecraft, patiently, maybe, awaiting liftoff, right, Mike?
Oh, they're very patient at this point, and so far so good today. It's been a very smooth count, as Rob Navius mentioned earlier.
And so the plan is for Butch and Sunny to be docked. That
Roger.
was a call out saying that the pad team has cleared the pad. Now, the plan is for Butch and Sunny to be docked to the ISS for at least 8 days, and then after, they will return to Earth with a soft touchdown in the American Southwest. That's video and sound from inside Starliner during its return to Earth 2 years ago as part of the Orbital Flight Test 2 mission. Its heat shield will reach 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit during reentry. Parachutes then deploy, and the heat shield is discarded to expose Starliner's airbags. The original test pilot you see on the bottom center of your screen, Rosie the Rocketeer, collecting data of what astronauts might experience during landing. Starliner is the first and only American orbital crew capsule to land on land. This allows for quicker access to crew and cargo. It also makes turning the spacecraft around for future missions quicker. But Mike, Starliner can also land in water in the case of an emergency.
Absolutely. Starliner has a lot of heritage and commonality with the Orion spacecraft, which lands on water. Starliner is a little bit smaller and a little bit lighter, so it can actually land on land. It has those airbags, as we saw. I can't wait to try them out. That's the first thing I'm going to ask Butch and Sunny about. How are the airbags? Because Soyuz is a little bit hard landing, but everybody's fine. But it's really those airbags, I think, are going to make a difference. But landing on water, we have a different airbag configuration. And so we have a fifth airbag that opens up in the middle, and so it's definitely planned that we could land on water, but we save that only for emergencies because refurbishing the capsule afterwards is going to be kind of tough with all the saltwater contamination. So we'd really like to land on land. We have 5 spots in the southwest of the United States that we can land on.
And I remember Sunny saying that she would much rather land on land because she said she had a lot of anxiety with landing in the water, even after you're back on Earth, because it's such a long rescue process and you're bobbing in the ocean. You know, she said, when you land on land, it's done, you're safe.
See, that's the Air Force perspective. That's how we always think of things too. The Navy guys, they should like the water, but no, this is jokes aside. That's exactly it. It's a lot easier to find us and a lot more options if and when we land on land.
All right, so we're coming up on 35 minutes until liftoff.
And here comes a comm check.
Yeah, I want to set the stage now for a series of comm checks.
Go ahead. Yes, sir. Op 60, step 10, step 20. Blast danger area is clear.
Roger.
So yeah, we expect to hear repeated communication checks with Capcom in Houston and the crew. This is an opportunity for them to also discuss any anomalies or resolutions to those anomalies, but we've been saying no issues, the team today, so that's great news. And then these comm checks that we'll hear now, we're going to periodically hear them throughout these final 34 minutes. And again, communication is so important, and we want to make sure that those channels are working properly from the crew to everybody else on the ground that's helping to monitor launch. And where we are now, again, the pad team has cleared the pad.
So it's just Butch, Sunny, a Starliner, an Atlas, and Centaur all together.
Right. Yep. The first 2 astronauts to fly in Starliner.
Go ahead. Yes, sir. I can also give you step 60. Flight hazard area has been cleared of all personnel accounted for.
Roger.
Butch and Sunny, the first 2 astronauts to fly in Starliner. Sunny will be the first woman to test an orbital spacecraft. And the last time people flew to space in an Atlas-class rocket was nearly 61 years ago. CFT is going to be that final test to certify a second commercial spacecraft to ferry astronauts to and from the space station. And this is a cool fact, too. Actually, once in orbit, for the first time in NASA history, the agency will have 3 different crew spacecraft orbiting in space simultaneously. So that's, of course, the International Space Station, the SpaceX Crew Dragon, and then Boeing Starliner spacecraft. What an incredible milestone.
That is an incredible milestone, and NASA's going to break that again, hopefully soon, when we have another spacecraft. We're working here at the Kennedy Space Center to get Artemis and the Orion spacecraft up into space, too. So these are exciting times, and we're building a future where there's even more spacecraft in the future with humans on board going to space. And that's more opportunity for future astronauts.
Yeah, Dee, what do you think about that? Again, Boeing, Boeing Starliner joining as one of the 3 crewed spacecraft that's in orbit.
Yeah, exactly. I echo exactly what Mike said, that this is all about expanding human space flight. So having another vehicle, once this is certified, is going to do exactly that. It's going to get more people into space. Of course, this time to the International Space Station, it's going to increase science. But of course, there's also private missions. So, at the end of the day, it's always great when you can get more people, into space.
Yeah, and we've been asking you to submit your Ask NASA questions from social media, so let's answer some more of those now. We have this one from, love this name, Shaquille Oatmeal on Twitch asking, what's the life of an astronaut like between launches, Mike?
Yes, we spend all of our life, training and wanting to become an astronaut, and then once you're an astronaut, what's it like? And so we do a lot more training. But I'll say that the last time I flew in space, we just had our landing anniversary on June 1st on STS-134, and that was in 2011. That would have been a great day to launch, but we chose not to. That's 13 years ago. So in the last 13 years, what have I been up to? And that's been helping get Dragon and Starliner up into space, helping my friends aboard the International Space Station as Capcom. I helped Sunny when she was doing spacewalks, and we help each other. It's all part of a big team. And so today it's great to see Butch and Sunny. They've both been waiting a long time to go fly again. Trying to get a 3rd mission or a 4th mission is really, you have to wait and be patient. And Butch and Sunny are going to have they've been working hard on Starliner too. And that's what we do between missions. We help get ready for the next missions and help our friends be ready and support them while they're in space.
Yeah, and the Commercial Crew Program is so important because in working with our commercial partners, it really allows NASA to pursue other things, like, again, returning to the moon. Our eyes are set on Mars with the Artemis program.
Indeed, and I'll just say I've enjoyed working both with SpaceX and really with Boeing. I mean, when we saw our teammates on the montage earlier, it just it made me tear up a little bit, and I'm not afraid to say that because there's a lot of respect with the team.
And let's take another question now. This one is from World Citizen on YouTube asking, does the crew on the space station watch the launch?
So right now it's the middle of
L minus 30 minutes.
30 minutes to go.
RC, conduct weather briefing on Channel 8 Weather Conference Net.
Roger.
Arm control, start arm hydraulic final preps.
Roger.
LOX 1, perform pogo suppressor charge.
Roger.
Prop 1, perform RD-180 transducer converter calibration.
Roger.
P&E 2, perform Centaur LH2 SVV cycle test.
Roger.
That's all the communications between the launch team, basically all the steps that's needed to get us to T0.
Yes, less than 30 minutes left. So aboard the International Space Station, if the crew gets a minute, I do believe that they're beaming up this launch broadcast. So hi to my friends aboard the International Space Station that they're going to watch the launch. They're very invested in this. They've been waiting for weeks, months for the Starliner to arrive, and we're good friends with the crew on board, so it's going to be very cordial. But yes, I remember watching
L minus 29 minutes.
the shuttle's launch. And then when my friends landed on either the shuttle or on the Soyuz, we would try to watch the landing coverage too. So certainly we were always watching NASA TV.
And we did get a chance to talk to NASA astronauts Tracy Dyson and Jeanette Epps prior to launch.
Prop 1, LC.
Prop 1, go.
Are we complete?
Yes, RD-180 transducer converter calibration is
complete and the engine FIV is open.
Roger. Flight control, start flight control, final prep.
Roger. LC, Peony 2.
Go ahead.
Centaur LH2 SVV cycle tests are complete.
Roger.
Again, Tracy Dyson, Jeanette Epps, two of the astronauts that are on the International Space Station already. We did get a chance to talk to them prior to launch.
Update complete.
And they
Roger.
said they are ready for Butch and Sunny to arrive. They've gotten their areas all set up for them, so they're really excited to welcome them just about 26 hours after liftoff today. Again, 27 minutes, 53 seconds and counting until liftoff of Butch and Sunny, the first two to fly Boeing Starliner capsule to the International Space Station. Let's go over now to Brandy and Jim inside Mission Control in Houston.
Thanks, Megan. Lead Crew Flight Test Flight Director Mike Lammers is getting ready to poll the flight control team here in Houston for a go or no-go, verifying that all of Starliner systems are ready for launch. Everything is looking good at the moment, and Lammers will use this poll to determine his own response to the final go, no-go poll by the launch conductor just before liftoff.
Once we do get into the terminal countdown time frame, there are a few major activities that the team will oversee. The first is Starliner's transition from ground power to battery power. That comes about 18 minutes before launch, and we leave it as late as possible so we can launch with those batteries as...
Go ahead. Arm hydraulic final preps are complete.
Roger.
L minus 27 minutes.
We leave that power transition as late as possible so we can launch the batteries as close to full charge as possible. A few minutes later, with less than 10 minutes to go before liftoff, Starliner's ordnance will be armed. That activates the critical systems that are needed to detach all the things that Starliner would ultimately deploy or jettison as it climbs to orbit, or back for a landing if that became necessary. And then finally, just 1 minute and 15 seconds before launch, they'll work with the crew to activate the launch abort system, which would rocket the crew to safety in the case of an abort or on the pad early in the ascent.
This will likely be the last you hear from us until liftoff. So we are going to send you back to the team in Florida to let Megan, Dee, and Mike see us through the rest of the countdown. Go Starliner.
Now let's take a closer look at Starliner, the next generation crew capsule that you see atop the Atlas V rocket there on launch pad 41 on Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Mike, Starliner is something, like you said, and Butch and Sunny, you guys really have your fingerprints all over that to make it the ride to space that you guys wanted.
Indeed, Starliner is definitely Ferguson even called it a astronauts or pilot spacecraft.
And so that next generation crew capsule, it measures 16.5 feet tall with a diameter of 15 feet. That's about the size of a mid-size SUV. It was designed to carry up to 7 astronauts or a mix of crew and cargo for missions to the International Space Station. After today's test flight, NASA will fly crews of 4 or 5 with cargo. Starliner is also reusable up to 10 times. I'm sure you're excited for your opportunity to fly in Starliner, Mike.
Oh, indeed. We're hopefully Butch and Sunny, along with Calypso, are going to pave the way. We'll be in the other spacecraft that Boeing has. We have 2 capsules, and so again, it's always good to have an extra one and a backup one, and we're looking forward to flying next year.
Let's head back over to Johnson now, where we have Rob Navius with an update for us. Rob.
As we mentioned earlier, in the midst of Starliner arrival preparations on the station, NASA astronauts Matt Dominic, Tracy Dyson, Jeanette Epps, and Mike Barrett are preparing spacesuits to be used for a trio of spacewalks scheduled to begin on June 13th. Other maintenance work is also planned for today by the expedition crew, as they gear up for the docking of Starliner tomorrow to the forward port of the Harmony module. Once Starliner docks, it will be the 6th visiting vehicle at the International Space Station, a crowded house 260 miles above the Earth. We're standing by here in Mission Control for the Atlas V to take flight and for a new chapter in human spaceflight history to begin just 23 minutes from now. With that, we'll head back now to the Kennedy Space Center.
23 minutes, 9 seconds and counting until liftoff. So let's check back in with ULA's Dylan Rice and Boeing's Lauren Brennicky with the latest. Guys.
23 minutes.
Hey, Megan. Thanks for coming back to us here in the
FYS,
ASOC. We've
switch
been
all
monitoring.
secondary decoms to RF link and verify lock.
Roger.
Initiate orbital perimeter calculations on primary CCLS.
Roger.
Monitoring those procedures here, and we're coming up on about L minus 22 minutes to launch. And around this time during the last launch attempt, our team worked through what you may have seen a suit pressurization issue. They worked very quickly around this time in the countdown to make sure that everything was going smoothly with this. But when we switched to internal power at L minus 18 minutes, that triggered a small voltage trip, and flight software correctly identified it and turned off the fans. So we quickly turned them back on, just like you would do with your computer, off and on. And today we're going to turn the fan off when we move over to internal power so it doesn't trip again. Then we will turn it back on after. The real difference is that crew will lower their visors about 5 minutes later this time. That action would usually be taken around now or a minute or so from now, and we will listen for that in just a few minutes. The Capcom will tell the crew to put their visors down at that time, and that is a configuration that is needed for proper airflow through their suit. In an emergency, they could pressurize their suits.
Go ahead.
Pogo suppressor charge is complete.
Roger.
LCSYS.
Go ahead.
All secondary. Secondary.
Yeah, you're breaking up, SYS.
All secondary decoms verified on our link.
I did copy that. Please check your headset.
All right, as I was saying, that in an emergency, they would be able to pressurize their suits quickly if needed. And it's a little different for them this time because, as we mentioned during this broadcast, their helmet is really more of a visor. It lays back like a hoodie on their shirt, and they pull it forward and then just zip it up. And this config also calls for them to deflate their lumbar support and secure their restraints from launch. So once we get to that point, it's really buckle up, it's almost go time, and then the crews will report back when finished. And then while we're talking around L minus 19, we're also going to be looking for the Starliner readiness poll for terminal count. That will happen on a side channel. So I'll be listening for that, and I'll let you know when we hear it. We do have a few polls coming up. That one is short. It will take place in the Boeing Mission Control Center, or BMCC, here in Florida. That is where the spacecraft launch conductor, Brian Gartner, will pull people in that room in charge of the propulsion system. Yeah, you see the room there on your screen.
L minus 20 minutes.
PNE-1, reinitiate AHB charging.
Roger.
RLM, verify redline monitor and event table are in the correct configuration for terminal count.
The lumbar support.
Verify.
RC, verify solar radiation, acceptable for launch.
Verified.
Right, you might have heard, kind of came in faintly.
Starliner copies.
They asked them to go ahead and deflate their lumbar support. Wasn't sure if we're going to hear a little bit more about that. But again, there will be 3 calls coming up on this Starliner readiness poll for terminal count. They will pull the mission support room manager, or MSR. After launch, the BMCC turns into mission support as things shift over to Houston. They will also pull the spacecraft test conductor, who monitors our power systems.
Switch to channel 1. All personnel and visitors remain in present position until launch. Maintain operational silence in the LCC.
This is the LC with a terminal count briefing. If a condition exceeds a launch constraint anytime after the terminal count status check, the observer shall announce hold on channel 1, identify their station, and briefly state the reason for the hold.
So, Lauren, as we were mentioning earlier, there's been traffic on multiple side nets, and that announcement that you just heard is Chief Launch Conductor Doug Lebo now bringing the team out from the individual subsystem nets, bringing everybody to the command channel, channel 1, for the final minutes of the countdown here. So we're gonna start to hear more traffic on the command channel as we start to do our final configuration steps for launch. So we're going to hear a couple of things. We're going to hear...
minus 18 minutes. Flight control, perform launch on time verification.
Roger.
We're going to hear some final avionics checks like that last call. We're going to hear hold fire switch verification. The range hold fire system allows representatives from Space Launch Delta 45 a hold button in the up the road at the Morrell Operations Center. So if there's an issue, a range safety issue that comes up, they can press a button and automatically stop our sequencer. So that's called a hold fire check. Those hold fire switches will be configured shortly, and we'll also start to hear calls about wrapping up our helium bottle charging on both the first and second stage.
And Dylan, as you mentioned, with the traffic on the loops increasing a little bit, you at home may notice that we are speaking less. And so we are going to be listening to some of these things as they happen live with you.
Roger.
And we feel it's important for you to be able to...
Go ahead.
AHB charging reestablished and at flight mass.
Roger.
minus 17 minutes.
OSM, place SRB ignition SNA switch in the enable position.
SRB ignition enabled.
Verify FCO, RCO, and OSM hold fire switches are in their proceed position.
Ready to proceed.
All right, we're going to send it over to NASA's Daryl Nail at Hangar AE. Daryl.
All right, thank you very much. And getting a final look at the weather, I can tell you this, it's a beautiful day to fly. Outside, our launch weather officer told us that there's no change in the forecast. We are 90% go, and what a beautiful shot of our beaches here from the courtesy of our chopper team here at the Kennedy Space Center. Folks coming out to enjoy the launch and an amazing day. Weather, no changes again. Low-topped cumulus clouds on land, which you see some of it there, but because they're low-topped, that's not a concern. When a rocket flies through a big, thick cumulus cloud, it can trigger a lightning strike, but those clouds are not the kind that can do that, according to Launch Weather Officer Melody Lovin. And so we're good to go there. We also have launch visibility is always a factor here in the southeast. Can you see the rocket and from where? And our friends at United Launch Alliance provided us with this graphic so you can see about which point in the launch you would see the rocket. If you're within the first two inner circles, you should be able to see the solid rocket boosters jettison a minute after launch. Folks in the Orlando and Central Florida area will be able to see it about 90 seconds of flight, and then it will come into view for much of the rest of the state after more than about 2 minutes, including Tampa on the west coast of Florida. The southeast corner of Georgia might be able to see the Atlas Centaur separation, which happens after 3 minutes of flight. Again, we're looking good here at the ASOC. Richard Jones polled his team, the NASA operations manager.
15 minutes.
And all of them are go.
LC flight, channel 1 and air to ground 1 are now merged, going to air to ground 1.
Roger.
We'll send it back to the host desk.
LC flight, air to ground 1, ready for contact with Starliner on channel 1.
Roger. Starliner, LC, com check on channel 1.
Those are comm checks again between different teams.
Loud and clear.
I have you loud and clear also.
And our astronauts, who you see there. Again, this is the test flight.
Houston, com check, air to ground 1. Houston, Starliner, loud and clear. Houston has you loud and clear on air to ground 1.
Test flight, and Boeing is working towards certification. To do that, there are a total of 87 flight test objectives and many more operational capability checkouts. So take a look at some of the main objectives with the crew on board. I'll go through a couple of them here. So they will demonstrate the performance of crew-related equipment. The crew will perform hatch operations and transfer emergency equipment. They will also evaluate the vehicle and transfer cargo while in a docked configuration. They'll conform functionality of manual piloting and deorbit with a successful separation of the crew module from the service module. And finally, they will demonstrate Starliner's entry and descent. 13 minutes and 24 seconds from only the 6th time NASA astronauts will launch on a new spacecraft designed for crew. And if you're curious about the previous 5 flights, we have you covered. Check out our video here. Mercury Redstone 3 was the first test flight. Alan Shepard, May 5th, 1961.
Gemini 3 with astronauts Gus Grissom and John Young launched March 23rd, 1965.
Apollo 7, October 11th, 1968, with Wally Schirra, Don Isley, and Walt Cunningham.
STS-1 launched with astronauts John Young and Robert Crippen, and it launched April 12th, 1981.
Starliner Houston, your suit fan Bravo is repowered. It looks good. Please close your visors. Column closed.
You saw video there of Demo 2, May 2020, Doug Hurley, Bob Benken.
And then, of course, today's NASA's and Boeing's crew flight test with Butch Wilmore, and Sonny Williams.
You know, Mike, 12 minutes and 15 seconds to go. How are you feeling?
I am excited. I'm grateful to ULA and Boeing and NASA team that we are sharing this historic moment together. Go Starliner.
Yeah, our hearts and well wishes are with Butch and Sonny as they make history testing what is poised to be the second commercial crew vehicle that is certified to ferry people to and from the International Space Station. So with 11 minutes and 46 seconds to go, let's send it back over to ULA's Dylan Rice and Boeing's Lauren Brennicke to walk us through the final moments of today's launch countdown. Let's do it, guys.
Let's do it, Megan. We just heard the Starliner readiness poll is a go. We know the crew's visors are down now, so we are moving along smoothly into the final 11 minutes and 30 seconds of this countdown. This is an instantaneous launch window today, which means that we will launch when the orbital path for the ISS aligns with the Space Coast. Once we get into orbit, Starliner will be working to catch up with the space station, eventually reaching speeds of more than 17,500 miles per hour. It'll take about 25 hours or so to get there. And we are going to be watching here any minute
minus 11 minutes.
For the crew access
arm. Control, so the crew access arm for launch.
Roger.
Right on cue. Crew access arm about to start moving away from the spacecraft. And Dylan, we will watch it move very slowly today, but it could move much faster if needed.
That's right, Lauren. It takes about 2 minutes to rotate the 120 degrees back away from Starliner to its stowed position and latched position on the crew access tower. Here we go. But we could, in the event of an emergency, redeploy it in less than 15 seconds.
It's amazing that it can do that. We hope to not have to ever see that happen. After liftoff today, Brandy and Jim will continue commentary from Houston through ascent, spacecraft separation, and the orbital insertion burn. We will have the shot of Butch and Sonny inside Starliner until the moment of launch, and then we will get it again when we get to the ISS.
minus 10 minutes. Flight verify CST 100 on internal power. Verified. Starliner, configure ordnance for launch.
Touch and wait.
All right, the spacecraft is running completely on its own now. And they are configuring ordnance for launch. That means the devices that initiate our separation events are ready to support both nominal and contingency operations that happen or could happen during ascent.
So, Lauren, we're just about 2.5 minutes now away from our terminal count status check. The terminal count status check is the final report from each operator indicating that their system, whether it be a ground control system or a launch vehicle system, is ready to execute the final 4 minutes of the countdown to launching the rocket. At this point, if there were an issue, the anomaly team would be discussing it, but nothing like that has happened right now. All's quiet. I am expecting to hear all members of the team report go when pulled by Chief Launch Conductor Doug Lebo.
And we're actually hearing on a side channel that they are preparing for the launch vehicle systems poll. This is the long one. A lot of people view this as their favorite poll. It's kind of fun to listen to them list off each system, and then that team will give a final go or no go for launch. you will be able to watch cameras on the rocket today, and live telemetry feeding back will provide a real-time look at the spacecraft model when video isn't possible during the ascent as it moves through the dynamic phases.
L minus 8 minutes.
Under 8 minutes before Butch and Sunny head back to a place they consider home. Both of them have spent 2 different stints of about 6 months on the International Space Station, and they are thrilled to be going back for a 3rd time. Sunny told me she even cried the last time she left the space station because she didn't know if she would ever go back. So this flight is a dream for her.
LC arm control. Go ahead. Drew axis arms stowed for launch.
Roger. LC switch to ready position. All steps are complete prior to status check.
Let's listen in to Chief Launch Conductor Doug Lebo conduct that final terminal count status check as we prepare for launch.
L minus 7 minutes.
Status check to proceed with terminal count. Atlas systems, propulsion.
Go.
Hydraulics.
Go.
Pneumatics.
Go.
LO2.
Go.
Water.
Go.
Centaur systems, propulsion.
Go.
Pneumatics.
Go.
LO2.
Go.
LH2.
Go.
Has gas.
Go.
Electrical systems, airborne.
Go.
Ground.
Go.
Facility.
Go.
RFFTS.
Go.
Flight control.
Go.
GCQ.
Go.
Op support.
Go.
COM.
Go.
Umbilicals.
Go.
Arm control.
Go.
ECS.
Go.
Redline monitor.
Go.
Quality.
Go.
Op safety manager.
Go.
ULA safety officer.
Go.
Vehicle system engineer.
Go.
Anomaly chief.
Go.
Range coordinator.
Clear to proceed.
Flight director.
Houston flight is go.
Starliner.
Starliner go.
Launch director.
You have permission to launch.
Proceeding with the count. ALC. Verify T0 is set for 14:52:15 Zulu.
Verified.
Starliner, net is clear.
Thank you, LC. For everybody listening, just a thought. Sonny and I, as we were traveling to the pad, we saw many American flags, and many of you were waving flags at us. And then as we reached the pad, we look up, and of course there's that American flag on the side of the White Room, also one on the side of the rocket itself. And we know that that represents unity and resilience and unified efforts for the common good. And that's what Sonny and I have witnessed this last month. Each of you displaying what this nation's forefathers envisioned, a people committed to God, family, and country, a people who use their gifts and talents for the common good and are passionate and tough. And we all know that when the going gets tough, and it often does, the tough get going. And you have. And Sonny and I are honored to share this dream of spaceflight with each and every one of you. So with that, LC, let's get going. Now let's put some fire in this rocket, and let's push it to the heavens where all these tough Americans have prepared it to be.
Let's go, Calypso. Take us to space and back.
LC flight, Starliner configured for terminal count.
On my mark,
Roger.
the time will be T-minus 4 minutes and counting. 3, 2, 1, mark. 3:55.
Resumed for
Ground
on-time
power is enabled.
liftoff.
Just beautiful words from Butch there. No better example of unity on this planet than what happens at the International Space Station, where Butch and Sunny are headed in just 3 minutes and 30 seconds.
3:30.
Atlas
hydraulics at flight press.
Atlas boosters hydraulic steering systems now pressurized for launch.
Starliner's LAS prop valves are configured for launch, the propulsion valves that need to be open in the case of an abort from the pad.
3 minutes.
Pressurizing Atlas tanks. Securing LO2 topping.
250. FTS internal.
Flight software is in ascent mode. It is now set for the uphill climb.
Vehicle internal. 155. Launch sequencer start. 150.
Securing Centaur LH2.
Securing Centaur LO2.
Vehicle is now transferred to its onboard batteries, and topping is
140.
completed.
Launch enabled. 137. FTS armed. 120. OCU's armed. SCS count started. EDS ascent.
Starliner, last arm to auto.
Last arm auto.
Roger.
That call meaning if the emergency detection system on Atlas detects something.
Rock report range status.
Range green. 54. POP started.
It will trigger the launch abort system on Starliner and fire automatically. If that happened, the spacecraft would push itself away from the rocket a mile up and a mile out.
Atlas at flight press.
30. Centaur at flight press. 25.
Status check. Go Atlas. Go Centaur. Go Starliner. Godspeed, Butch and Sonny.
Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. And liftoff of Starliner and Atlas V, carrying two American heroes, drawing a line to the stars for all of us.
Commander Butch Wilmer, they're calling down to Mission Control here in Houston that the spacecraft has begun rolling into the right attitude for its ascent, and the Guidance, Navigation, and Control Officer here in the room seeing good data on that.
Starliner passing through max Q, or the point of maximum dynamic pressure where the forces of air friction are highest, which in Sunny will shortly be passing through Mach 1, where the speed of sound.
You got a good throttle up.
Starliner and Atlas Looking good with speeds and attitude increasing as expected. Coming up in less than 20 seconds, the solid rocket boosters will run out of fuel and burn out.
Good SRB burnout.
Good SRB.
Now the fuel in the solid rocket boosters has been depleted. The Atlas main booster stage will be continuing its burn for about the next 3 minutes.
Good handle.
Good handle.
That call, good handle from Capcom Joshua Kutrick, indicating that the crew now has the ability to initiate an abort manually if needed. All looking good so far. Now 2 minutes into Starliner's flight and coming up on the solid rocket booster jettison at the 2-minute and 40-second mark.
CLG and net, good trajectory.
CLG.
The solid rocket boosters have now been jettisoned after seeing Starliner through its first 90 seconds of flight. Team on the ground here confirming that it was a good jettison and that the vehicle's trajectory continues to look good. Now 3 minutes into today's flight.
Atlas booster now throttling back to limit the G-forces on Butch and Sunny, trying to limit that to around 3.5 times the force of gravity you would feel while on the ground.
Staging.
Here in the ground.
Decals open, you have sublimator act.
Decal sub-act. Great act.
Team on the ground reporting that they saw the ascent cover on top of Starliner that's been protecting the spacecraft's docking system through its climb into orbit. They saw that jettison as planned.
Staging was good. You have good control.
And now the second stage's 2 Centaur engines have ignited to continue pushing Starliner into space, fueled by liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen. The next milestone that we'll be watching for is the aeroskirt jettison.
Starliner, you had good booster performance. You're up to plus 31.
Plus 31.
Atlas Control reporting booster performance offset of 31 seconds of ISP, or specific impulse, relative to its design baseline of around 450.
All continuing to perform well, almost 7 minutes into today's flight.
Good centaur. Good centaur.
Capcom Joshua Kutrick continuing to pass good news up to Starliner's crew. That last one reporting that the Centaur upper stage remains in good condition and is performing well, pushing them into orbit.
St. John's open. St. John's.
Starliner is now entering its first guided abort range, where Starliner would direct itself towards a specific location in the event of abort. In this case, just off the coast of St. John's, the capital of the Canadian province of Newfoundland Labrador.
Starliner MECO converged 11:5 to 11:52. Good perf, you're at 34 to 36 seconds. 11:52, 34 seconds.
That call letting the crew know that the main engine cutoff, MECO, should happen just about on time, about 12 minutes into today's flight. Another good indication that Starliner's ascent is taking along exactly as expected. Main engine cutoff is a major milestone marking Starliner's arrival on orbit. Still got about 2.5 minutes until we get to that, with the spacecraft continuing to perform well, make its way towards orbit.
No action, Starliner on the LCL. That's just the system coming up into controlling mode. Outstanding. No action.
Once the main engine's cut off, the next step will be the launch vehicle separation. That's set to occur just short of 15 minutes after launch, when Starliner will separate from the rocket and fly free in space for the first time. Flight Dynamics officer reporting that at this point, Starliner could potentially make an abort landing off the coast of Ireland.
Good cooling.
And they're, again, all continuing well, so we're not expecting to need that abort.
As Starliner is rapidly approaching orbital velocity, this abort region is only available for just over 1 minute, where Starliner would just continue up to orbit after that.
Thirty seconds to MECO.
Just 30 seconds to go. Now until main engine cutoff, marking Starliner's arrival on orbit.
nominal MECO Starliner.
Nominal MECO.
And with that nominal MECO call, that's main engine cutoff. We've got good energy, meaning a good velocity for continuing to orbit, and a good plane, meaning Starliner's trajectory is aligned with the International Space Station for rendezvous tomorrow.
And with that, Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams returned to orbit. Individually, they are both
LV
extremely
step
experienced astronauts.
14:5 to 14:52.
14:52.
They're both very experienced astronauts with a combined total of 489 days in space between them. Starliner is also the third spacecraft that they've launched in. Both have traveled to the International Space Station via space shuttles and Soyuz and are now well on their way to repeating the journey via Starliner. It's also worth noting that Williams' role as pilot marks the first time that a woman has crewed a flight test of an orbital spacecraft.
Just a few seconds ago, you heard Capcom Joshua Kutrick calling up to Butch and Sunny. With the expected time, Starliner will separate from Centaur at about 14 minutes, 52 seconds into flight, just under 2 minutes from now, or 1 minute from now.
That is actually the last major milestone for Starliner's ascent. All the hard work is done, but we need for Starliner to be flying on its own before it can begin heading towards the International Space Station. There's a slight pause in the action here while Centaur repressurizes and does some attitude control. We'll get into the right orientation to send Centaur on its way and then jettison it and move into the right orientation for the orbital insertion burn, which will come about 31 minutes into flight.
No action on the cabin temp Starliner.
No action.
And about 10 seconds until an expected launch vehicle separation.
LV SEP confirmed.
Good LV SEP.
And now that Starliner has separated from this Centaur upper stage, we have a big thank you to our partners at ULA, providing Butch and Sunny a smooth ride to space.
That is not the end of today's orbit activity, though. The team will now be getting ready for the orbital insertion burn, which comes 31 minutes after flight. So that's still about 15 minutes away now. Sunny Williams and Butch Wilmore will be getting their tablets out and doing a few other activities to get Starliner ready for that. And that will be that will be the first in a series of burns that will set Starliner on its way to the International Space Station. Once again, Starliner with astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams on board launched from Florida, the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, Launch Pad 41 at 9:52 a.m. Central, 10:52 a.m. Eastern today, and they have now made it into orbit.
Your nominal TDRA show MDL is active. You have good targeting for OI.
Good targeting.
the call for good targeting and information about Starliner's TDRS schedule being good means that we've got good communication with the ground. TDRS is the tracking relay data satellites that Starliner uses to talk to the ground, and the flight controllers on the ground are seeing the dynamic.
Go ahead. Yeah, if you could relay a message to our brethren at ULA.
We're all listening. Go ahead.
Yeah, they've been a member of the family for a long time, but now it's official, and we want to welcome them to human spaceflight.
We all copy all and really appreciate the words.
And Houston Starliner, we are on the tablets and in insertion monitor.
Copy tablets, we're with you, insertion monitor.
So the crew have their tablets out, so no longer using the paper procedures now that the vehicle has stopped moving so quickly. So there's a handful of things that the crew's going to do now, mostly just prepare the inside of the cockpit so they are looking at the right data to prepare for the upcoming orbital insertion burn. The vehicle itself has done a few things recently. Started to power on the solar arrays on the back of Starliner and turning off several of the thrusters that are no longer needed at this phase of flight. Upcoming in about 4 minutes, Starliner is going to start to orient itself in the direction it needs to do the orbital insertion burn. And the crew inside the vehicle will be turning the wireless access point on and allow them to stream some of the data from the spacecraft onto their procedure tablets.
And Houston Starliner, last arm is off. Backup control switches, enable 1 on, enable 2 off. SMRCS is the mode.
We copy off. Enable 1 is on, enable 2 is off. SMRCS, you're in a good config.
Good config.
Your EXDV targets are on board and good.
Good EXDV.
Things will be pretty quiet as Starliner gets into position for the orbital insertion burn that's still about 10 minutes away. Starliner is actually designed to be pretty autonomous and, in fact, docked with the space station on its last trip around without the help of any crew on board. But we do still want to know that if needed, Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams could take control and manually abort the spacecraft's approach to the station if they needed to. So to prove that, one of the few things on their agenda after they reach orbit will be to perform a test of the manual piloting mode.
This test will involve first pointing Starliner's nose towards the Earth so that its communication antenna on the back of the service module is pointed at the satellites, the TDRS satellites that allow it to communicate with the team on the ground. They'll then move Starliner so that its solar arrays are pointed at the sun, showing they could charge Starliner's internal batteries as needed. And they'll follow that up with a demonstration of the star trackers, one of the ways that Starliner determines where it is in space, pointing Starliner away from Earth so that the system, the Vesta system, can get a good look at the stars.
The next step will be for the crew to manually speed Starliner up and then slow back down, which will slightly raise and then lower their orbit and prove that they can manually break away from the orbit that the space station is in if they needed to. At that point, they can move on to the last items of the
still no
test.
action on your cabin temp. You're in a good config. It's 74 degrees in there. And that's just due to that T2 sensor sitting beside the light. So we're actually going to inhibit that particular sensor. We'll let you know when we bring it back online.
Okay, great. Looks like we're on our way to thrust align.
Denver.
Josh Gutrick calling up that the crew can ignore some alarms they're seeing on the temperatures inside Starliner. That's just a result of one of the sensors being next to a light that's causing it to show higher than it actually is. But it sounds like the crew are pretty comfortable and are getting into place for that orbital insertion. As I was saying, after they have manually broken away from the orbit of, proven that they can manually break away from the orbit of the space station, they are going to move on to the last items of their test for tonight. That's manually moving Starliner into the right orientation for re-entering the atmosphere, and then moving back into the attitude that will let them soak up some sun with the solar arrays and try a different method of manually charging the spacecraft's batteries. But again, once that all has to wait until after the orbital insertion burn. This is, again, the first of several burns that will put Starliner on its way to the International Space Station. We've still got about 6.5 minutes until we fire up the engines for that burn.
Starliner, we did not see the hand controller deflection. Just wanted to know if you did that yet.
No, we'll get it now.
All good.
Team here on the ground seeing that everything is looking like it's in the right configuration for the orbital insertion burn. Now less than 5 minutes away. Starliner is currently about 102 miles above the Mediterranean Sea, heading southeast over India in the next few minutes.
Starliner, good config for the OI burn.
Good config for OI.
And good config from the OI burn. Crew and ground controllers noting that Starliner is pointed in the direction it needs to for the OI burn. It should also be about the time that the crew are using their tablets for their procedures, also charging them, keeping them topped up for the rest of the rendezvous.
We unfortunately won't have a view of Williams and Wilmore as they work through this procedure. although we had a view of them from inside the cabin on the ground, Starliner isn't able to send that view to us again until it gets to the International Space Station. So you'll be seeing this screen quite a bit as Starliner was getting into the right position for the burn. And actually just now you can see some of the engines firing that help it steer and move around in space. And you can also see what attitude it's in at any given time. Lots of good information on the screen.
It is. A lot of this information actually directly mimics the views that the crew is seeing, especially the one in the upper left-hand panel. That is an exact copy of the display the crew is using for their attitude directional indicator. It also covers what mode their translational hand controller and the translational pointing is in on the left side. On the right side, the pointing guidance, which tells the Starliner in automated mode which direction to point, or when in manual mode, which direction the crew needs to move the vehicle, like we're going to do in some of the manual piloting maneuvers. And following back up a little bit on the camera conversation, there is a planned upgrade of the Mustang system that we should see on our PCM-1 mission that will include live feeds from inside the cockpit.
And the Mustang system is the cameras that we were seeing views from earlier.
That's correct. There's a handful of cameras around the inside of Starliner. We often see the one from kind of beneath Butch and Sunny. That's given one of the better views without being directly right in their face while they're inside the cockpit during pre-launch. But once they're in orbit and they've gotten out of their seats a little bit, we should be able to see a little bit more around the cabin.
We'll, though, as you've already heard, continue to hear regular audio updates from the crew. Everything going well now that Starliner is just under 30 minutes into today's flight. We've got about a minute and a half left to go into that orbital insertion burn that will be kind of the final end cap, really, to today's ascent, which, again, took place at 10:52 a.m. Eastern when Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams launched inside the first Starliner to carry crew members on board from the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, Launch Pad 41. They made it to orbit about 14 minutes later, and now we are just again waiting for this first of a series of burns that will set Starliner on its way to a rendezvous with the International Space Station that is scheduled to take place at 12:15 p.m. Eastern, 11:15 a.m. Central tomorrow.
And we're coming up at about 40 seconds till the orbital insertion burn. This burn is going to take Starliner out of its slightly suborbital trajectory and push it up to an altitude that will allow us to catch up with ISS for a rendezvous later tomorrow.
15 seconds left to go, and once again you'll be able to see those engines firing on this digital screen here that show when the burn has started.
2 seconds. And flight controllers here in Houston, seeing 4 good OMACs, good burn. We take a look. That was a good OI burn. You're maneuvering to NavCal 1.
Good live burn, going to NavCal 1.
And with that call up, both crew and flight controllers agreeing that that was a good OI burn. I'm looking at the trajectory plot here in mission control. I see our trajectory pointing us directly up to the altitude we need to go to for the next burn. Right now, Starliner is moving into NavCal mode, or NavCal attitude. That's going to be the first of several positions that Starliner, directions that Starliner points itself to track some of the stars from the Starliner and update the position inside of the position orientation of Starliner inside of its guidance, navigation, and control algorithms.
And of course, you're seeing lots of happy faces and cheers here there in Florida. Everybody glad to see Starliner safely in orbit with Butch Wilmore and Sunny Williams in tow, sending it on its way to the International Space Station for docking tomorrow at 12:15 p.m. Eastern Time. Once again, Starliner safely on orbit, has conducted a good orbital insertion burn and is on its way.
Starliner, Houston.
Go ahead, Starliner, Houston.
Yeah, you do have good cooling. The sublimator is working. We are watching it, though, because the water usage is just a little more than we thought we were going to see. You probably noticed that. It's a reason for the advisory there. From the ground, we'd like to swap you over to the other leg. So we're going to close sublimator leg 1, wait for about 60 seconds, and then open up leg 2. You'll see us do that. No impact or action.
Okay, we copy. We'll be watching. Thank you.
Joshua Kutrick there again, giving the crew some words about information they're seeing on orbit. This one related to sublimators, which are used to cool the spacecraft down, but just letting them know that there's nothing that they need to be concerned about. The team will keep watching that. In the meantime, as Starliner begins making its way to the International Space Station, we're going to check in with Rob Navius in the International Space Station Flight Control Room. Rob?
Yeah, thanks very much, Brandy. With Starliner en route to the station, the work now just beginning for Wilmore and Williams. First up, an important rendezvous burn called the NC burn, which will adjust Starliner's altitude relative to the station and begin to refine its path to the orbital laboratory. Flight Dynamics will be assessing the accuracy of Starliner's initial trajectory and will update any adjustments to that trajectory for subsequent maneuvers to be conducted over the next 24 hours. Now, we're expecting to hear the first of 3 audio reports from the crew during their free flight on how the ride uphill to orbit was before they move into what are called far-field demonstrations of the vehicle. That will include manual piloting tasks and a manual translation control test. That will prove Starliner's ability to execute a manual docking if required, as well as an abort capability prior to docking. Keep in mind, we're providing continuous coverage now of Starliner's flight to the International Space Station. On Thursday morning, rendezvous operations will begin in earnest shortly before 10 a.m. Eastern Time, leading to a targeted docking for Starliner to the station at 12:15 p.m. Eastern Time. So please stay with us around the clock as we bring you every minute of Starliner's flight. For now, we're going to sign off from the International Space Station Flight Control Room here in Houston and go back to Megan, Dee, and Mike Fink at the Cape.
Hey, and welcome back to the Space Coast of Florida, where about 36 minutes ago we witnessed the launch of